Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the regular meeting of the Windham Southeast School District for November 4th, 2020. The meeting has been properly warned, and I will call us to order at 6:02. Fortunately, I'm sorry to report that Liz Levac, a Latin teacher at BUHS, passed away this week. She was a Latin teacher at the high school. She also worked in the Beams, the after-school program in the middle school. She was a member of the local standards board and the Vermont Educators Health Initiative Wellness Coordinator for the school. Her kindness and compassion will certainly be missed. And also this week, Fran Jakewith, a longtime math teacher who retired several years ago from the high school, also passed away. So I'd like to ask you to join in a moment of silence to remember these members of our community. Thank you. This evening will be a night of learning for our school board. We've got a presentation from Food Connects and from our new special ed director, and quite a bit of information from the superintendent as well. So we'll jump right into the process. I'd like to recognize Sheila Humphries and Conor Floyd, who are from Food Connects, and I will ask them to unmute and tell us about the program. So Sheila and Conor, why don't you go ahead. I don't know if Allie will be joining you or not.
Yeah, I think she might chime in. Thank you so much. Hey,
Great,
Allie.
thanks.
Yeah, Allie's here, and I think Steve Head from Putney might join us as well.
Great, thanks, Sheila.
Is it possible for us to share our screen?
It certainly is. Let me click the little button that allows that, and you should be able to do it right now.
Perfect. All right, let's see if we encounter any technical difficulties here. You able to see that all right?
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. So thank you. My name is Conor Floyd. I'm the Farm to School Program Manager at Food Connects. And so we'll keep this presentation brief tonight. I know there's a lot on the agenda, but we are going to want to cover three different things. One, we'll just provide a brief overview of who we are and what we do. We also want to celebrate the diversity of farm to school programming that's already happening in the district. And we'd like to touch upon the school nutrition programs, which have done an amazing job feeding students over the past 9 months of the pandemic. If you'd like to go into more detail about anything that we cover, we're happy to answer questions at the end, or we can connect outside of this meeting. And so to start, Food Connects is a nonprofit that's based here in Brattleboro with two main programs. There's the Food Hub, which supports local producers by giving them an affordable way to get their products into more markets that they wouldn't be able to reach themselves. This is also making local food more accessible to the community. And so the Food Hub sells food to schools, hospitals, co-ops, colleges, other retailers throughout the region. Our second program, Farm to School, works with schools to increase local food purchasing, school meal participation, and food, farm, and nutrition education. Some specific examples of the support we offer includes meeting facilitation, grant identification and writing, curriculum support, garden planning, and professional development.
And so the primary focus of our work in terms of farm to school, we look at what we call the 3 C's, which are the classroom, the cafeteria, and the community. And when we're building robust farm-to-school programs in our region, we're really looking to connect those 3 C's, the cafeteria, the classroom, and the community, and that's our sweet spot, is when they all come together. So there's cooking and taste tests happening in classrooms. When COVID is not in our world, we may be doing some classrooms, may be doing some farmer visits, field trips to local farms. We'll be involving the community through harvest dinner, and all of these things are supporting our local economy by increasing purchases of local food. And honestly, during COVID, and we'll talk about this later, but we've really found that school gardens are really blossoming during this time, and also that we have really been able to build some powerful community coalitions in helping feed families in the district. So that's one of the silver linings that we're finding these past 6 or 8 months.
There we go. So we're going to highlight a few schools. We're not going to go through all the schools in the district, but before that, we want to touch upon some programs that span more than just one school. And so the Summer Garden Program had its largest year in 2020 with 6 of the elementary schools participating. So Food Connects coordinates care of the gardens over the summer for the schools, ensures that crops that were planted in the spring by students are healthy and harvest ready come fall. This year we partnered with Rise Vermont and 3 community arts organizations to offer family engagement activities in tandem with our weekly open garden hours. And while the engagement results were mixed due to the pandemic, we're working with Rise Vermont to secure a second round of funding for that program so that it can run again in 2021. Next, we had the Food Box Program. And so Food Connects often represents the interests of the district in community collaborations. This was the case this last spring when we were able to bring concerns raised by the school nutrition program to the Windham Region Hunger Council around food access for families. And the Hunger Council is a region-wide coalition of anti-hunger organizations. And so Food Connects was able to connect with the local food shelf Food Works and the Vermont Food Bank and develop a plan to get additional groceries to families in need who are not already being served by Food Works. This program served around 130 families, and it leveraged existing community resources by having Food Works order food from the food bank. Town staff helped unload the deliveries, school volunteers packed the boxes, and buses delivered the food.
And in the end of August of 2019, which feels like decades ago now, but back when we weren't in a pandemic, we were able, through funding from the Thompson Trust, to offer a training on trauma-sensitive schools and nutrition, and how our farm-to-school work in the district could be more trauma-sensitive and trauma-informed. We trained 37 staff from several elementary schools in the district, and changes were made as a result of this training. Things like having visual timers in the cafeteria to help students who have had trauma just be able to have more of a sense of the timing for meals, an expansion of share coolers so that if a student has something on their tray that they are not hungry for and another student is hungry, there is a way to share it with another student and also keep the food at the right temperature. And encouraging staff to sit with students in the lunchroom and model healthy eating behaviors, and generally just working to make lunchrooms and our eating environments in the school supportive for all students. So whether that's providing a quieter space for students who find that lunchroom overstimulating, making sure that lunch is a judgment-free zone for kids so that they're not feeling ashamed about what they have on their trays. It was a really wonderful opportunity for our wellness leaders, school nurses and school counselors and school nutrition professionals to work together to really think about changes they can make in their schools. So we were really proud to be able to offer that training. Now we're going to look at a few, as Conor said, not all the schools in the district, but just a few highlights from some of the schools. Academy School I've been working with for the past over a year, couple of years. They went to the New England Farm to School Institute, put together a team that's been working really hard on their action planning and goals. They've done some great work with their gardens. For the first time last spring, they had a garden coordinator, Kathy Casson, who was really able to put time and energy into the gardens and is continuing work this fall, working with different classrooms, harvesting and cooking projects. And she's been a real asset to the school. It's great to have her on board.
And so Guilford has had a strong farm to school program for years. They're also committed to outdoor education. Sarah is Guilford's farm to school coordinator, and she works with students throughout the school. She manages their school garden, leads cooking projects with each grade, and this year has also turned a lot of her attention more to those outdoor education opportunities. She also organized a holiday market last year as a fundraiser for Guilford's farm to school program. Each grade designed a garden product. They marketed that through commercial videos, and then they sold their products alongside local artists at their evening event. This is a really successful fundraiser, and hopefully it's going to return next year. And so another piece is that Guilford also has a forest education program, and there's a strong partnership between both farm to school and forest education, outdoor education. And the entire school community has benefited from this through a large mobilization of community support. More outdoor learning spaces have been built throughout the campus this year, enabling safe and engaging instruction. And then finally, Food Connects has been able to support the school through numerous grant opportunities. Through Rise Vermont, we've gotten funding for the garden. Through an agency of agriculture grant, we were able to get a new refrigerator for the fresh fruits and veggies program. And we've recently submitted a reimbursement grant to the state for some of the outdoor gear purchased this fall.
And Oak Grove School is my former home. Actually, I worked at Oak Grove School for 13 years before coming to Food Connects, so I know this school well. And the big exciting project that happened at Oak Grove School this past year was that the garden moved. So it was kind of tucked away in one corner of the big playing field. It is now right up against the building outside the art and library in this great little space that was kind of underutilized before. And there is, for the first time at Oak Grove, a garden coordinator, Tara Gordon, who also is garden coordinator at Green Street School. And she also has been doing some work in Vernon as well. And she's just really transformed that garden. It's a whole new space. And it's just absolutely beautiful, the work that she's done. She's also working with students in the garden this fall. And in addition to that one primary garden space, she's also put in native plant gardens on several different spaces around the school and done some work with students on identifying native plants and then also taking them the 5th and 6th graders on a walking field trip up to Fort Dummer State Park to take what they learned in the school gardens and then look for native plants out in the forests there. So she has also been a great asset to the school. We also supported them with a couple grants this year. We were able to help with a grant through Blue Cross Blue Shield to put new kitchen equipment on their cooking cart, and also a grant to help with some professional development for their staff around outdoor education and buying some outdoor gear for students to stay warm when they're doing more outdoor learning during the COVID time. Putney Central School has a little bit of a different model than other schools in our district in that they have their own independent meal program that's been in place since 2005. And Steve Head is both sustainability coordinator and food service director in that program. They have robust gardens, including a small hazelnut orchard that generates $200 to $300 in sales each year for the school, for their farm to school program. They do taste testing, local purchasing, and they have a salad bar that's been really popular among their students. Steve was telling me yesterday that about 30% of their students order the salad bar each day, which has really increased the consumption of fruit and vegetables among the students, and he's found it to be really empowering for the students, for them to be able to make their own choices about what they eat, and it's also encouraged them to try new foods that they wouldn't have tried otherwise. He also, as sustainability coordinator, is really thinking about packaging, has really made a commitment to minimal packaging, and during COVID also been working on biodegradable packaging as much as possible. And they're currently looking for a new source of Vermont milk. Their current source, Thomas Dairy, closed, and they've found that switching to bulk milk has reduced their packaging quite a bit, so they want to continue with that. And now we are going to talk more specifically about the meal program in the district. Allie West, who's been with the district for several years now as food service director at Academy School, has, and at the Brattleboro Town Schools, has stepped into a new role recently. She's now the Brattleboro Regional Food Service Director, serving quite a few of our schools in the district through Fresh Picks Cafe. And some of the successes of that program, Breakfast After the Bell has really been growing. It started at Green Street School. It's now in 5 schools, and participation among students in breakfast has increased dramatically as a result, which is great for students to have a healthy breakfast to start their day. Currently, Universal Meals is available in all schools due to COVID, but in normal times, right now, Universal Meals is in all the Brattleboro Town elementary schools through the CEP program, and also at BUHS and BAMS through Provision 2. And the fact that it's district-wide right now, and actually statewide Universal Meals, has really increased participation everywhere. So it's been really a great help during the pandemic to have those Universal Meals, and that'll be carried through June of 2021. Allie West does quite a bit of local purchasing. And a lot of that is through our food hub, which makes it really easy for her to just purchase a lot of product from a lot of different vendors all in one place. So she has purchased a lot, including from Green Mountain Orchards, Commonwealth Dairy, Harlow Farm, and Dutton Berry Farm, but she's purchased from 26 different local farms. So that's money that's going straight back into our community. She also does Harvest of the Month taste testing in her schools, and she is very committed to scratch cooking. The schools that she's been working with prior to taking this more district-wide position were doing 90% scratch cooking, and she really wants to grow that to the other schools she's working with now in her new position. And one of the things that we are often contacted by other schools and other farm-to-school colleagues that we have in the state, or colleagues from Hunger Free Vermont or other organizations, is about the Brattleboro Town School District nutrition standards. And these are remarkable. This is something that does not exist in many places, but several years ago, the Brattleboro Town principals spearheaded an effort to increase the nutrition standards for the Brattleboro Town elementary schools. Things like no hydrogenated oils, no high fructose corn syrup, no mechanically processed chicken, lower sugar, increased omega-3 fatty acids. So these are really a model that other schools statewide are, asking us about, and other schools in the district are asking us about. How can we get those standards into our schools? They're really an inspiration for others. And so we're very proud of the work of the Brattleboro Town Schools to bring these nutrition standards to the students in Brattleboro. We'd love to see it grow.
Nice. All right. And so to end, I just have 4 quotes, and I'm not going to read them, but these first 2, I think really speak to our role, Food Connect's role around organizing programs and helping teams make strategic decisions. A large focus of our work is around sustainability of programs, and that's going from staff engagement to funding to maintaining realistic expectations. So while it's hard to quantify these aspects of our work, it's a large piece of what teachers and administrators find most beneficial from the support that we provide. And then the other 2 are just some perspectives on the school nutrition programs. And I want to make sure that we leave off highlighting these programs. And so when we're talking about local food or supporting local farms, that may be financially out of reach for some families on an individual level. But when we're able to get more local foods into school meals or develop Allie's and Steve's capacity for more scratch cooking, then we're truly reaching every student in our community. And so it's thanks to the commitment of the entire district that we have such strong programs that are continuing to grow and improve. And so with that, we will conclude, and we'd love to answer any questions folks have, or you can feel free to reach out to us at that email address.
Thank you, Conor and Sheila. That was wonderful. And before I ask for questions, I just want to remind you that this is being recorded on BCTV. And as I was watching it and looking at the documents, I realized that I wish we had a lot more people here. And I hope that you'll use the link to the BCTV video to share this information with others, and particularly other districts or groups around the state or the country that are trying to develop these kinds of programs. This is really exemplary, and it's astonishing to me. And I remember the first time I was asked to join the farm to school board, and it was just the very beginning of this, and the growth has been really phenomenal. I don't know if you've tried, well, I won't ask any questions. I'll ask if there are any members of the board that have questions or anything to say to Conor and Sheila. Waiting for the little blue hands to show. Well, while we're waiting, I'll ask one that did come to me. Where's your funding come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. So specifically looking at the Farm to School program, our funding is primarily through contracts for coaching services through like the Agency of Agriculture and the state, grants. So we've received some grants from the Thompson Trust, Neal Foundation, Holt Foundation, and then a big part of our program is also member school kind of member dues or fees. And so each of the schools in Windham Southeast contribute on a school by school basis. And that helps fund our work. Member school fees cover about half of what the cost is for Food Connects to work with a school. And so it's those grants and other contracts that are helping subsidize that work.
Right, so we have to make sure our legislators know to continue the support from the state. Great, thank you.
Definitely.
And do you have a record of, I know there have been some transitions over the years, but have you got sort of a chart of the growth of school participation or student participation or just, anything that sort of shows what's happened over these past years? It really is phenomenal.
Yeah, I don't know.
The intersection with the community and the expansion of the programs and with the other food providers in the region, it's amazing.
Yeah, we don't have a good timeline. We've got some organizational charts internally because Food Connects, the other half that we didn't talk about as much is the Food Hub, which has also been growing really fast and is looking at breaking $1 million in sales this year, which is really exciting.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that's primarily money going back to those farmers that we work with.
I'm not seeing any questions. So I guess I'll thank you for coming. And again, this is on BCTV, so you can take the clip and send it wherever you want. But thank you for coming and providing this information. It's really great to see the depth of commitment to the schools and to the engagement with the community. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. So we're moving into the exciting parts of our agenda. We have a consent agenda, the clerk's report for minutes from October 21st and 27th, the regular meeting and the special meeting, and warrants of October 5th, 2020, October 13th, 2020, October 19th, 2020, October 26th of 2020, and the October 9th and the October 23rd payrolls. So could I have a motion, please, to accept the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Thomas. And a second, please.
Second, Jackie.
Thank you. Moved by Thomas and seconded by Jackie to accept the consent agenda. Any questions or comments or corrections on the minutes or questions about the warrants?
Yes, I had one comment if I could.
Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
I think there was an error in the minutes for the short meeting. I know that, let's see, it was Kelly Young was there, but she's listed in the participants.
I think possibly, well, we'll add that, make note of that, and ask Thomas to add that. I think probably that was after he wrote all the names down. Kelly came in a little bit late, so that may explain that. Any others? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of the clerk's report with the suggested adjustment to the minutes of October 22nd, please indicate by saying aye. Unmute and say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Thank you. Now, let's see, communications. We have had some communications, and I'm certain that they will be addressed in the administrative report. So this follows really well on the heels of the Food Connects presentation. We're going to hear from the elementary principals about the outdoor education programs. So Andy, is that something you're going to, do you have a list or a process you want to follow?
I didn't have a process. We can start off probably with Kelly at Academy.
Okay.
So this came out of, I believe, the PPEC meeting last month, just a conversation around what's taking place. So I asked the elementary principals to share a few sentences about what's going on with outdoor education at their sites. Really knowing that, part of it, the school sites really define the level of what's going on. But there are great things happening at all our sites in terms of remote outdoor education. So Kelly, do you want to take it away?
Sure, thanks. I'll speak a little bit, and John Sessions, feel free to jump in too, please. So in the summer, we purchased a few tents of varying sizes, and we've got rain gear for grades K through 3, rain suits. And for grades 4 through 6, we purchased ponchos, which are pretty large, so they cover pretty much the whole bodies of kids, and they're waterproof. So the whole school has some type of rain gear for most weather. And we really just encourage teachers to take kids outside whenever possible. We, as a school, have been moving toward that model for the past few years anyway, so this felt like a good opportunity to really utilize our grounds. And the Smith family's been for years, really generous with their land, and allowed us to put up some structures and dig some more fire pits, and classes are creating little outdoor classrooms built by the kids, so nothing fancy, but we've got some tarps, we've got all sorts of really neat things outside on the trails. Kids take hikes, they're working in the garden with the garden program that you just heard about, which has been really great. And let's see, what else, John? Am I missing anything? The bike path?
Yeah, I'll add two things. One is, as Kelly mentioned, we have the new addition of a community bike park on the Academy School campus, which has been a great way to get kids outside and active, which has been a nice addition to our community. And second of all, what we've seen is really being outside in nature has really been a springboard into thematic based learning for our kids. As an example, we have a classroom who I was out walking in the woods and I saw a deer in their outdoor classroom. And so I took a picture and shared it with their class, which then led them to do an in-depth study of deer in a first grade classroom and things like that with owls and different wildlife in our community, which has been really exciting to see kids really engaged in that kind of learning in our school. So.
Yeah.
Great, awesome. Thank you, Kelly and John. Julianne, do you want to follow?
Sure, I'll follow. Thanks. So, so at Jefferson School, even before the pandemic, with the work of the new leadership council last year, we were really focused on developing our outdoor learning and play environments. We kind of have a situation now where there's a little bit of a blank slate at Jefferson School, which is kind of exciting because there was a big parent movement a couple of decades ago to develop parent constructed really fun equipment out on the playground, and that is all ready to be kind of revitalized and redone. So we had surveyed the school staff and the community through the town office about what they would like to see at Jefferson School. We would like the community to really see it as a center for outdoor recreation and play. And so that is ongoing. Part of that work during the pandemic led to a number of parents creating a multi-use trail in our woods, which bikes can go on that trail. It's also used every day by our students for nature walks and as a way to access different outdoor classrooms, and has picnic tables and different locations to go to. So students have been labeling trails, doing some tree identification. So that's really exciting. We're part of a grant with Putney Central and Guilford School with the Henderson Foundation. So and Bonnievale Environmental Education Center, Joan Carey was instrumental in securing that grant. And at Jefferson School, we're really focusing on our pre-K to 1 teachers. Joan is working with those teachers, providing professional development for them in a hands-on way where they're developing their nature-based curriculum, their routines, lessons focused on natural science that also embed math and literacy into those units. So that has just started within the last couple of weeks, and we're really excited about that. And yes, as Kelly mentioned, we too, we have tents and pre-K to 1, they're outfitted with rain suits. We hope to work with Dummerston Cares, in getting more, more outfits for our students so that we have plenty. Our leadership council had a winter clothing drive, so we're really focused on making sure all our students are ready to go for the colder weather.
Thanks, Julianne. Mary Kaufman, do you want to share what's going on at Oak Grove?
Sure. Well, Sheila did a lot of that work already with the Food Connects presentation, so we're super grateful that Sheila and Conor have worked with us and Tara Gordon has been great in getting kids outside and in the garden. We had a lot of transformation happen over the summer with our outdoor spaces. We are in the process of building a sensory path with lots of different opportunities for kids to taste, smell, feel, touch, all sorts of different things. A lot of different plants and fruits and vegetables available. So our kids are definitely taking advantage of that. Classrooms are getting outside into those spaces. We have developed two, formal outdoor spaces. We had a cedar tree donated to us that we've turned into stumps and benches for an outdoor classroom space. We also have another tree that was donated that we turned into a stump circle around another tree. So classes have those assigned to them throughout for like a week each month. A lot of time spent outside socializing. So they're doing a lot of play and working with their classes outside. Kids are taking their books outside and reading and just being outdoors. While we don't have access to all of the forest and trails and things like that that other schools have, we're making the best use of our outdoor time as we can. As Sheila mentioned, our 5th, 5th, and 6th graders have gone to Fort Dummer for a walking field trip, which was really cool. They had a great time there. And we are looking to outfit our kids to keep them outside as much as possible in the colder weather. And so we have gotten a few donations and we're continuing to look for donations and then providing, especially for our youngest kids, the outdoor gear that they need. And with Sheila's help, we've also secured another grant. So part of that grant will go toward professional development for staff, and part of it will go toward gear for the kids. And I cannot forget about Beak, who has offered their services every year. They're great. They're a great partner, and they have these kits that a few of our classes have taken part in, and they come to school, they drop off the kits, the teachers use them, and then they go back to Beak, and it's pretty cool.
Well, thanks, Mary. And Mark, do you want to share what's going on at Green Street? And so I think what's important is to know that, you know, every school has used every single square inch available. I think, you know, both Green Street and Oak Grove are fantastic examples of what you can do when you have a neighborhood kind of city-based school in terms of maximizing that what's going on there. So Mark, you want to share what's going on at Green Street?
Sure. Thanks, Andy. Yeah, it's been a goal for the last 5 years to really maximize our campus to the best of our ability. So 4 years ago, we budgeted for an outdoor classroom, which we have installed, which is right next to our school garden. Our outdoor classroom gets used routinely throughout the school year. Classes sign up to use that space. We've invested into a garden coordinator. Tara Gordon's name has been brought up a few times tonight. She's amazing. She collaborates with classroom teachers, and all of our students are in the garden routinely throughout the fall and the spring. And then in fact, in the winter months, Tara helps with grow lamps, and classrooms actually plant herbs and donate those to local restaurants throughout the winter months. So it's really a year-round program, collaboration with Tara. This past summer, we budgeted for some retaining walls that we built around the perimeter of our gymnasium. And the goal for those spaces is this spring, our students, along with Tara and classroom teachers, will be designing what those spaces look like. And then the students will be participating in actually building flower gardens and vegetable gardens on those spaces. So the spring is going to be exciting. We've built the structure, but then the kids are going to do the design and actually get their hands dirty and build these spaces. We've also worked over the past few years exploring the woods between the Crow Lot and Green Street, and classrooms have been building pathways to connect those spaces, which has been ongoing work. Mary talked about Beak. We've had a great collaboration with Beak as well as the retreat farm. And we routinely walk to the retreat farm for experiences on that farm, and the staff has been amazing. So that's what we've been doing, and we've been continuing to do. We had tents up, as all the schools had, to start the school year to do outdoor instruction during COVID. We've just recently taken those tents down just due to the weather. But proud of the way we've been able to maximize our space, and it's been a lot of fun. And I think if you drive by the school, you'll see kids outdoors pretty much throughout the school day. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. John, do you want to talk about Guilford?
Sure. First of all, I just want to say, as someone who lives right across from the Oak Grove School, that a big shout out to Oak Grove, because it's beautiful what's being created over there in the play space and in the outdoor, the field out there. So it's great.
Thanks, John.
You're welcome. And a big shout out to Food Connects. Conor Floyd is amazing, and he has been a great partner. And he outlined much of what we've been doing. Guilford, prior to the pandemic, we had classes pre-K. Our pre-K has been out 5 days a week prior to the pandemic. They continue to be out every single day. K through 6 prior to the pandemic would spend at least a half a day, once a week, outside. At this point, every single class, pre-K through 6, is spending 50% of their time outside. So this crisis has presented us with the opportunity to further our outdoor education program and our nature-based, place-based pedagogy that we've been engaged with for many years. Tremendous excitement and enthusiasm in the community. Our Leadership Advisory Council has spearheaded a very successful fundraiser that has garnered approximately $48,000 for us for outdoor education. So we're well resourced for the future. Our plans are we secured part of that money is a $10,000 grant with the Henderson Foundation to partner with Antioch University, the Center for School Renewal, and specifically their place-based and issue-based programs. Mary mentioned professional development. We began professional development with Beak a number of years ago with our pre-K, and we, like Dummerston, trained pre-K and K1. This year, we're focusing on the upper primary grades. And we've had a great relationship with Beak, and Beak is also a partner with Antioch. So we see that in the next few years, doing lots of professional development to further refine our outdoor education program. And our big goal is to create in our children a real sense of place as citizens of Guilford and citizens of Vermont in the world, and also to develop a deep sense of love for nature and in the environment. We're doing everything from math and literacy to art to thematic instruction, as John Sessions mentioned. We're having children help design and create. Every single classroom has an outdoor space. We have 3 brand new outdoor pavilions that have been built by volunteers. So there is a lot of movement in Guilford. So we're very excited with our outdoor education program, and we will continue to keep you updated.
Thank you, John. Herb, you want to talk about Putney?
Sure, thanks. And hi, everybody. So for those of you who may be familiar with Putney, you know that we have the incredible advantage of a very large tract of land that's was formerly designated as the school forest. It's been since put into basically a trust. and it is called A Force for Learning. So each classroom, pre-K through 5, has established a sort of a beachhead out there, I guess I'd say, in the forest, and they have their classroom space. We have outfitted the kids, like other folks have said, with clothing suitable to the weather. And we've been really utilizing this opportunity to rethink moving forward how we might conduct school on an everyday basis. And I think that there's been a lot of energy and conversation over the years that I've been at Putney about, gee, wouldn't it be great if, you know, fill in the blank, all of which is connected to the outdoors and learning. The work that we do with Beak and also Four Winds is enthusiastically embraced by all of the teachers. So I think that, you know, at the end of the day, once we emerge from this insanity that we're currently engaged in with COVID, there's going to be some real innovation happening, and I'm proud to say that my teachers are leading the way in our building on it. And I've got a number of people who have extensive personal outdoor experience, Knowles type programs and so forth. And so when the opportunity presented and we had conversations about, hey, you know, what about outdoor classrooms? It was all hands went up. And so everybody got creative, and we're making that happen. We had a lot of tarps and tents around, some of which are semi in tatters now because of the incredible wind. But like Mark mentioned, those are coming down soon, and we'll have to be rethinking about what we do next. But that's really what we're doing. I mean, we're outside at least 50% of the day with all the kids, and it's been terrific. We've seen a real enthusiasm on the kids' part as well. And the creativity that comes from outside play is just phenomenal to watch. So it's really been very positive.
Great, thank you, Herb. And Mary Ross is here from Vernon.
Good evening, everyone. I'll try not to repeat what has been mentioned by my colleagues. I know that outdoor learning is a priority at many schools. At Vernon, we've had a donation of outdoor lumber for outdoor learning spaces and for the playground with community partners such as Sir Sosimo Lumber. We've worked collaboratively with Rise Vermont to look for grant funding and secured grant funding, as well as opportunities to add to the Come Alive Outside Passport for children, which benefits the Vernon community and other local communities in our SU and others. Alicia Underwood's work at Rise Vermont has been invaluable for us here at Vernon. As Sheila mentioned, we've also added time for Tara Gordon, who is our garden coordinator, to grow our school garden space and opportunities for time in the garden with children at various grade levels. Four Winds has been mentioned, although it's a little bit different during COVID. They've been a valuable partner in Vernon for many years, providing opportunities and a space for volunteers to interact with kids with some really targeted nature-based learning. And finally, I'll try to be brief. We also have a strong relationship with our Vernon Recreation Department. We work really closely hand in hand, and we've done some work with the Windham Regional Commission to talk about how, as a community, extending out from the school, we can add access and signage to trails. Our students in 4th grade, for example, witnessed a really great project about our precious black gum swamp, which is unique to our community, and getting kids out there talking about, you know, specific habitats and spaces that exist only in our community. So it's a brief summary about Vernon. Thanks everyone for an opportunity to speak.
Great, thank you. So David, that's all our elementary schools talking about their use of their outdoor spaces. I have some updates around, you know, some of our planning, our current thoughts about where we are with.
Okay, let me just see for a second if the anybody in the board or in the public has any questions for the principals about the outdoor activities. It's a really, actually, there's a question from Emily. Go ahead.
So thanks to all the principals and Andy for organizing this. This was something that came up on the Programmatic and Performance Equity Committee. We were wondering really if everybody felt resourced enough to do outdoor education and to continue through the winter, because obviously that poses different challenges. And so it sounds like, I mean, there's such good work and a diversity of work and, you know, different, obviously, work going on in different communities, but also at different school sites because of their, you know, the things they have around them or the constraints. But I guess some people said they received grant funding. Other people were searching for things via like coat drives and everything. But I'd love to hear from any of the principals if they feel like there's any gaps, you know, that we could then think about and perhaps support.
I guess not. There is pretty, I was impressed by the amount of grant funding and the amount of support. Oh, Mark has a gap. Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, I don't have a gap. I just
Okay.
I tried to, in my comments, talk about budget and budgeting for these spaces. Because a lot of these spaces have been planned over years, and they have been reflected in our budgets. And thankfully, our school boards have supported that, and our community has voted for those. So I feel very much supported.
Thank you. Other questions from the board? I had a kind of a comment, maybe it's a question too. I think there are probably a lot of us who see this opportunity for all this outside learning and all this social and emotional activity as having a really expected it's going to have a really positive impact on the students' relationships with the school and the school community, the school staff, and also on their learning. And it would be, I don't know that now is the time to start figuring out ways to track data or somehow follow the progress of students in this context. But I think it would be really helpful to spend some time thinking about how to remember when we're done with this, remember how the kids responded to these kinds of activities and how their performances, how they behaved when they came back into the classroom, how attentive they were, how easily they were able to focus, the amount of time they were able to stay on task, and just their level of engagement, which are things that we expect to change, but it's easy to forget. And when somebody starts talking about, okay, well, time for the test, so we've got to do the benchmarks, and we've got to measure the lost learning, and all these really important things to do, the way to making up for all of the loss that we've had may involve continuing to do these kinds of things. So I'd like to have some way of recording, or like ask you all to think about some way of tracking this so that it's not just, oh, we remember that it worked really well, or we think this was better, or this was impactful. I think the level of science that's going on because of Beak and Four Winds and because of the outdoor activities is a real boon. And I'm not sure how we would log that as student achievement or important student learning. So anyway, those are just the thoughts that went through my mind when I saw school being described as something that I always thought was really the best way to go about it. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay, Andy, you want to go ahead with the current planning and the holiday break and such?
Yes, thank you for our elementary principals for doing that. I think you really captured the living laboratory nature of your school sites really well with the work you did, especially as we start thinking about engaging students around science and the purpose of really creating problem solvers and innovators. You did a nice job capturing that. So I want to stress with our holiday planning and our thoughts around the holiday, our message with our teachers and our families and our staff is really around the guidance, is following the guidance from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, and the Department of Health and the AOE, which has really been based upon, let's remember that there's a pandemic and there are kind of red quarantine zones surrounding us. I think that there was one blue, one green community someplace in Pennsylvania, but really it's a far reach for those things. So we're continuing to stress with our families the importance of monitoring the ACCD travel map that has real specific quarantine guidelines around that. As we started to unpack the information around the latest Strong and Healthy Start that was released about a week and a half ago. It was a late Friday email that we received, which is why I didn't get it in the email update to you that week. There are quite a number of changes with that information, and the extent of it essentially gave districts, because of the changes, until November 16th to really start to implement. So as we've started unpacking that, we've looked at our current structure as well as our future structure, and we've made the determination as a leadership group that we're going to keep things in place in terms of how they are now until the start of the second semester, because the work around reorganizing is going to be so intense. In the new Strong and Healthy Start document has really been a stress point around, there were typically 3 or 4 questions that were asked about, what is your temperature? Have you screened your temperature every day? Have you been around anyone with COVID? Do you have any COVID-like symptoms? And now there's a new question that's mandated that we're asked, is that, have you traveled to a quarantine county? And if students or staff answer for leisure purposes, and so for non-essential travel. Employees, people that travel for education are all considered out of state are all considered essential travelers. So there's not a concern about that. But if people are traveling for leisure purposes, for instance, that question would have to be answered in the affirmative of yes, we did, and this is where we went, and that's really for the purpose of contact or line tracing. There is an emphasis on the 3-foot spacing for elementary schools, and then stressing the 6 foot or more as a minimum, 6 feet as a minimum spacing at the secondary level. The guidance kind of really pulled apart the use of plexiglass. So in the earlier version of the report, it allowed some closer seating with the use of plexiglass barriers, and that now has been taken out, as the definition of close contact has been changed. And so now close contact is defined as 15 minutes being within 6 feet of each other for 15 minutes in a cumulative 24-hour time period. So it's no longer a contiguous 15-minute block, but it's cumulative, which in many cases will mean that most people have close contact throughout the course of a school day. There is some additional clarification around room cleanings. In the past, the prior documentation had said, well, let's let the room sit for a 24-hour period and then clean it. And now the recommendation is just clean it right away. And interestingly enough, there's been a change in the drop-off. One of our principals had this question that this may have informed the guidance. If a parent is supposed to be quarantining, whether they've been exposed to COVID, whether they've had COVID, or whether they travel to a quarantine county, that parent cannot be in the drop-off line. And so that's information that will be shared with families this week. It's one of those little details that's in the report, but from a school standpoint and a logistical and operational standpoint, it's an important question to know. Throughout the documents is really the importance of families and all individuals that are working in the schools accurately and honestly reporting where they've been. And that's really for that purpose of containment of the virus and kind of preventing that same kind of walled garden approach that we were using earlier when we opened. It's the same mindset, but it's really with the latest spike and surge in cases, that emphasis of accurately reporting and honestly reporting for things. And we discussed as a leadership group today the importance of stressing with families that if you have to travel, please make sure you're telling us the truth if you had to do so. And please make sure you accurately report, and then we'll figure out some asynchronous work for that child to do on those days that they were supposed to be in school but now have to quarantine. There has been a lot of stress around the use of organizational tools like seating charts and maintaining both seating charts in the buses as well as in the classrooms, and that's really for the purpose of line tracing, which is the ability to kind of go through where has a child been in relationship to other people. Many of our schools have adopted a practice of dropping off seating charts on Fridays and so they can be stored in a centralized location. So in the event that there's a phone call on a Saturday to say that a child at your school was identified with a positive COVID case, that they would have that ability to figure out where was that child in relationship to other people. In our planning, an initial survey has gone out to families to say how things are going, and can you give us a sense of that? Was sent to remote families at the elementary level, as well as I believe the middle school and the high school have done some of their additional surveys. And we have a targeted date, I believe towards the end of November, as we develop our model for the second semester, to get more of a commitment from families around what the second semester will look like. That model's still in the evolution process, but we do have a plan and a timeline to develop those items. So I don't know if we have any, can I answer any questions about the COVID planning, David? Or the COVID?
Yeah, are any questions from the board first and then the public? Any questions at all?
I see Michelle raising her hand.
Oh, okay, there it is. There it is.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Michelle, and then Liz.
I'm Andy, I feel like I missed that. What did you just say about surveying families and seeing how people are doing and middle school and high school being surveyed?
So there was an initial survey to remote families to say just to see how are things going with remote. And there'll be a deeper dive into the surveying of families later in November or early December. And that purpose will really be to gain a sense of numbers around our anticipated, what does second semester look like? Remember, our initial commitment was for one semester, and then we would evaluate it in the semester to see what does the next semester look like.
Okay, when did those surveys, when did that happen? I somehow missed it.
That was, I believe they were coming in, we talked about them yesterday, or they came, I think they were due yesterday. So I believe they were sent out last week.
Excellent.
I see Julianne's head nodding, so because she's on my screen, I can see yes. Okay.
Oh, that's great. Excellent, thank you.
Great. Liz.
So with the change in guidance around what constitutes close contact, are you still considering moving to 3-foot spacing in the elementary schools? Because it seems like that might be a recipe for disaster.
Well, the epidemic, so you can look at it in two ways. And so the team is still looking at this and examining the model for, development in terms of what we'll pursue. In an elementary classroom with the 3-foot spacing in combination with the 15-minute cumulative over a 24-hour time period, that kind of essentially, to me, it kind of mitigates a lot of the questions around the differences between 3 and 6 feet. So the 6 feet guidance was established. So 3 feet, let me back up, was as a minimum was released a while back. Yeah. That guidance, we avoided the conversation around it. One, out of comfort for our students and our staff as in that level of work, but it was also around identifying what's close contact. Now, since that close contact is revisited and redefined, some of that becomes a bit of a moving target. I think that from the Vermont Department of Health and the CDC, that they're stressing using this distancing because the greater risk is to students of not being in school. And so that's where much of that focus will become in terms of the greatest risks for students. And so that's the guidance around that level of work.
And teachers are being included in how you move forward for the next semester?
Yeah, so this is our initial conversations we've had as a group. We have a timeline with our principals to roll this out with their faculty once we've established the level of work and what that looks like. So right now, the focus has been on our planning for next semester. If we're looking at the models or what that tends to be, that level of work is a pretty heavy lift. So we can say quite comfortably that we're going to remain in our current format until the end of the semester, which is January 24th, I believe. We would restart for the 27th in the second semester. So teachers will be included in those conversations once we've identified the exact model and how that will roll out.
Okay, and are you going to address Thanksgiving break tonight?
So yeah, the conundrum about Thanksgiving break. Mm-hmm. And, we feel strongly as we talked as a leadership team, both at the elementary principals and the secondary principals this evening, was that this is a really volatile period for students. It's best that students are with us. It's best that students are in the buildings, and that we recognize that some schools have gone remotely, and we'll throw this out. You can have the board conversation on this. I'd appreciate the feedback. There's been kind of conversations at different levels around some school districts going remote. The idea around the remote piece is not that there's a worry about the virus or the virus spread. It's more of a worry about the logistics of acquiring substitutes if staff members happen to go out of state and then travel. And that's been the kind of the source of the conversation. So we felt we had a rather robust conversation at both levels today, and that we felt strongly as a group that perhaps the best place for kids to be and the best place to plan around is having kids in school, recognizing that we could go remote at any time based upon the virus spread, based upon the governor's directives. So that at the same time, while we're having this conversation around we want to be in school with our kids, there is a need to be remote ready. And we started the school year off with a focus on remote readiness. We are starting to see that urgency around remaining remote ready more and more as the virus spread continues to creep up in communities around us.
Erin Kachek.
Yes, hi. I'm just wondering if we could clarify, Andy, if the number of in-person days is actually going to change in this first semester?
No, in our conversations with the group, it was important for us. We thought initially that we might be able to make some adjustments and modifications, and in looking at the balancing of the amount of work required for second semester and the level of input necessary from staff, from teachers and from parents to develop what it looks like in the second semester, it's a really heavy lift to do that. It's essentially the work that was done over the summer, replicating that work, because there may be some changes, or there may or may not be some changes, depending upon what the model looks like. And so a lot of that gets down to surveying parents and families around what options would be once the model is developed. So the concern was really finding that level of balance while the principals are still running the school and working with their faculties around managing their load right now. We had to focus on how are we creating the best environment for our students at the start of the second semester.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Thanks.
Yes.
Any other questions on the current planning and the holiday break transition and the new guidelines? Okay, we will move on to the special ed presentation. Shelley Wilson, our new Director of Special Education, is here, and I will turn this over to you. Shelley, I think you can, it's set up, you can share the screen if you need to. And so first, please introduce yourself and then enlighten us.
All right. Thank you, David. Okay, let's see if I can figure this out. Bear with me. And we want to do the slideshow from the beginning. Okay. I can see my PowerPoint, but I can't see all of you. Is that normal? When you present?
We're still seeing you until you share your screen. We're still going to see you.
Okay. Can you see my screen right now?
No, not yet.
Oh, sorry. Oh, dear.
And I think what will happen is you'll see a few of the faces along the side of your screen. Here we go. There it is. Now we have it.
So sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
I do. You would think I never am on Zoom, but I'm literally on it all the time. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Shelley Weilson. I am the Special Education Director here in WSESU. I took over this position on July 1. And I'm very honored and pleased to be talking to you about special education services in our district. We have our coordinators here tonight, and so on this first introduction, I'd like them to introduce themselves too, and what schools they work with and students that they serve. I have worked in the district, this is my 18th year in WSESU, and I have a broad base of experience doing work in special education, from every position from being a paraeducator, a classroom teacher, special education teacher, intensive case manager, and now in this role as an administrator. I love and cherish this district. I've served the families here for quite some time, and so I'm honored to be here and talk to you a little bit about the services we provide. Liz, you want to go ahead and say hello?
Sure. My name is Liz Dimmick, and I actually grew up here. I was part of this district as a student. And I have worked in this district for a sum total of 11 years. I've worked at the high school, middle school, and elementary school level in this district. Most recently, I worked at Dummerston School for the last 8 years. And in this district, I've worked primarily as a special educator. I have been a classroom teacher elsewhere. I am new to administration and took this job on July 1, and I'm really excited to be working with Shelley. I'm learning a lot.
Joe, you want to say hello?
Sure. Greetings, everyone. My name's Joe Gruda, and I have been in the district now for 5 years. This is my 3rd year in this position. I've been an educator for about 25 years. I'm originally from the West Coast. And in addition to being a special educator, most of my career, I'm also a clinical social worker. So I try and approach, the role of special education from a social justice perspective, as well as like everything else that that we do, is in trying, support the diverse needs of our learners. So.
And Janice.
Hi, everyone. I'm Janice Stockman. I'm the Early Childhood Coordinator for our school district. Let's see, I've worked in this role since 2009, but in my entire career has been spent in early childhood in one way or another. In 1990, when the Brattleboro Town School District applied for and received a federal grant to work with young children. It was called the Windham County Family Support Program, which later evolved into Early Education Services. I was hired to start the home visiting program and worked with Judy Gerald, who was the founder of EES, for probably around 10 years, and then took a break and worked with the state of Vermont Child Development Division. But I love my job. I work with a great team of early childhood special educators, and we have a widespread throughout the community with community preschools and with our own public school preschools.
Thanks, Janice, and everyone. So tonight, I'm going to stick very closely to the agenda that was listed. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the AOE initiatives as related to special education services, and then address a little bit of some special education topics, just a very brief overview of what special education is and what it does. And then we had some questions about needs in terms of the pandemic and how we're addressing those challenges, and steps to improve communication. So who we are, we're a collection of professionals. A lot of the job titles are encompassed here on this slide. Everything from special education teachers. We have quite a few related service providers. including professional staff like speech and language pathologists, occupational and physical therapists, behavior interventionists. Over the past 3 or 4 years, we have integrated special education social workers into our professional team. We have the West evaluation team, which conducts special education evaluations for students in our district. And then we have quite a broad range of support staff, special education paras, registered behavior technicians, intensive service paras, certified occupational therapy assistants, speech language pathology assistants, and educational interpreters. So we have quite a wide range of staff that we employ to provide services to students with disabilities. A quick snapshot of our current system. Special education employees and services are administered from the supervisory union level and assessed to the school districts per state law. I'm not entirely sure. That's been in place for at least 6 or 7 years now, I believe, was when that change occurred. Our current child count is around 429 students in grades kindergarten all the way through adults without diplomas who might do an extended time in school. We have around 41 students in early childhood special education, and we are also in the process of doing evaluations for about 40 students. We serve students across all categories of disability in 10 schools and then an additional 10 early childhood centers. So one of the things that I wanted to talk briefly about tonight, because it would, there's a lot to talk about, is Act 173, which is an act passed here in Vermont in May of 2018. The purpose of this initiative is to enhance the effectiveness, availability, and equity of services provided to all students who require additional support in Vermont schools. And this act has many reasons for coming into existence, one of which has to do with funding, and it will change the way that special education is funded here in our state. It changes the funding from a reimbursement model, which we currently operate under, to a census-based model. Act 173 incorporates these 5 tenets from the DMG report, which I believe, I think I've talked about at the board level and others have talked about over the past couple of years. It was a study that the Agency of Education contracted with the district management group to find out what are the things that we need to do to make sure that we're meeting the most needs of most students in our public schools. So some of the outcomes of that report and analysis were these 5 things. Making sure that Tier 1 core instruction meets the needs of most students, making sure that we're providing additional instructional time outside of those core subjects, aligned to the core instruction to students who struggle rather than providing interventions instead of core instruction, making sure students who struggle receive their instruction from highly skilled teachers, making sure we are creating and strengthening a systems-wide approach to supporting positive student behaviors based on expert support, and then providing students with more intensive support needs, really making sure they're getting that specialized instruction from skilled and trained experts. So another, I would say last summer, August of 2019, the Agency of Ed put forth a theory of action document, which was sort of a synopsis of what are the tenets that school districts need to have in place to make sure that we're ready for implementation of Act 173 and this change in service delivery and essentially change in funding. So the AOE refers to these as 4 levers, and these are systems within our within our current construct that we need to make sure are in place and strong and working properly so that we can make sure that we are supporting students with all types of needs. So the 4 levers are listed here, making sure that educational support teams, EST teams at the school level are robust, having coordinated curriculum, a local comprehensive assessment system, and then providing needs-based professional development to staff and administration. So a few slides here on what is special education. And the term special education means specially designed instruction that cannot be provided within a school's standard instructional conditions or provided through the educational support system at no cost to the parent to meet the unique needs of an eligible child with a disability. There are many core ideas in special education. I'll summarize a few here for you tonight. The first is FAPE, or the idea of a free, appropriate public education. I'll talk very briefly about how a student becomes eligible for special education through the evaluation process. The concept of LRE, which stands for the least restrictive environment, and then accommodations and modifications. So the definition here for a free and appropriate public education, this is guaranteed by IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, means special education and related services that are provided at public expense, under public supervision and direction without charge to parents or students. It meets the standards of the state, including the requirements of Part B of the IDEA. It does include preschool, elementary school, secondary school, and are provided in conformity with an individualized education program, or IEP. You might hear that term very frequently in special education, which is the plan that teams develop to provide FAPE. So eligibility in Vermont, there are 3 general criteria for a special education student to be eligible for services. If you have been to an IEP meeting or an eligibility meeting, you may have heard this referred to as the 3 gates of special education. That's how we might talk about it at the team level with families, parents, and colleagues. So a child is eligible, or shall be eligible, for special education if they have one of the disabilities described in the rule, which I'll go over here in a second. The disability has an adverse effect on the child's educational performance in one or more of the basic skill areas, which I'll also go over in a moment. And the student needs special education services to benefit from his or her educational program, and the support cannot be provided through the educational support system, standard instructional conditions, or supplementary aids and services provided in the school. These are the categories of disability that are federal and at the state level. I won't read them to you, but there are, I try to do abbreviations for those as well. In our district, the disability category most often that children meet criteria for is specific learning disability, which is pretty consistent, I believe, with federal rates. And then developmental delay, we serve a lot of kiddos at that age. And then other health impairment, which is a category of disability that can encompass several health conditions. So the basic skill areas referred to in the rule are listed here. Basic, as you would imagine, there's reading, math, writing. We also have categories oral expression, listening comprehension, and motor skills. So these are the skill areas that a team will look at in the course of a special education evaluation to determine if a child's disability has an adverse effect on one of these or more of these areas. The concept of LRE, we talk about in special education a lot, stands for the least restrictive environment. A special education student's LRE is the school or class that the child would otherwise attend if they were not disabled, unless the student's IEP requires some other arrangement. And, you know, a couple tenants here just remind us that, you know, we start with the classroom as usually where we start as the child's LRE, or least restrictive environment, and that we don't remove children from general education classrooms just because that child needs modifications in the general ed curriculum. And we are required to have a continuum of placements for students with disabilities, which could include something like a special class or a separate school. But we have to be mindful that we're not removing students with disabilities from the general ed environment, that we're not, oops, go back, that we're not doing it because we're not modifying, using supplemental aids and services, so that this rule helps remind us of that. Accommodations and modifications, these are kind of the backbone of what might be in an IEP for a child, and what we work with special educators and classroom teachers work diligently on these concepts. Accommodations are adaptations or changes to educational environments and practices designed to help students overcome the challenges presented by their disabilities. And modifications are changes to instruction or curriculum that alters perhaps the content of that instruction or the student performance expectations. This graphic is just meant to illustrate, and of course I have my screen sharing right over it, so I can't see, there we go. This graphic shows, I got this from the Vermont Family Network and decided to adapt it for this presentation because I thought it was very helpful. Just shows you a little bit the process, very abbreviated, in a special education evaluation. So we start up here. With a referral and evaluation. We have to evaluate students before they are eligible for special education services. The team, otherwise known as an EPT team or an evaluation planning team, determines eligibility for that student based on the Vermont criteria. Then the team develops an IEP, an individualized education plan for that student. And the IEP team is responsible for determining educational placement. Placement refers to the provision of special educations and related services rather than a specific site. And you know, in general, we start with the general education classroom as the location from where we start. Placement is decided annually by every child's IEP team. Which is referenced here in this last little bubble. IEPs are reviewed by law. They have to be reviewed at least once a year. And then special education students are reevaluated every 3 years to determine continued eligibility for services. Nope. So some specific questions that I think, you know, were asked in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic. One was, where are areas that we have the greatest need in special education? And some of the answers kind of cross not boundaries, but they cross. They're just things what we need in general, not just in special education. One of the things that we are so I put these questions. I know I can come and do a presentation like this and give you my administrative perspective of the you know, the 10,000 foot view of where we are. But I also, on these next few slides, I got direct feedback from our special education staff, teachers, related service providers, and the coordinators, because I thought that synthesizing information directly from them would be more genuine and useful for sharing with the board. So in terms of areas of need, we have some things that we need, like stuff, and then we also have bigger picture and kind of ongoing needs within the context of the pandemic. So nuts and bolts, we need technology and we need hardware. We are talking at our regular meetings with special ed staff, and staff are hearing this at the school level too, that we really need to be remote ready. You know, if and when we do have to have a period of remote only learning, we want to make sure that students have the technology that they need. So we've been actively trying to get ahead of those needs in anticipation of a remote period. We continue to need training for families on how to work and use the technology, and our special ed staff and related service providers are really going above and beyond to work with families on training them to use certain types of equipment and technology so that those specialized needs can be met. We have a lot of families that ask for consumable materials for a variety of reasons, one of which I think is because there is a lot of screen time in this hybrid remote environment. So, you know, pen and paper activities, things that kids can do that aren't screen-based. Another area of need that we have right now in special education is staff, and that includes substitutes. I think that it's not, I don't think it's a secret that we are, you know, we're stretched to find substitutes who can come in and work and do some of the specialized work that special education requires. So that continues to be a need for us. And then professional development. I think that switching on a dime in March to provide specialized instruction with, you know, that was new territory for the whole country. And so we have been working with the Curriculum and Assessment Office, and also, you know, have been trying to get a sense of what special ed staff really want training on, and it really has to do with, you know, how to deliver these services in a remote environment. So we continue to explore that. In the bigger picture, I think that whoops, nope, I don't want to do that. Differentiating instruction. And I think that that is one of the core focuses of our work over the next year or two or more, is we really need to be mindful of how are we making curriculum accessible to all learners, and especially those with unique needs. It's also a challenge to differentiate instruction in these new environments, again, which is a new frontier for us. And special education staff are stretched to be doing that consultative work with classroom teachers, which is very needed, but also balance that with the direct service needs of the students that they serve, because our obligation, first and foremost, is to, well, not first and foremost, at the same time, special educators serve that collaborative and consultative role for helping students access general education, but they also have to deliver services per a student's IEP. So it's a balancing act, and people are working very, very hard for kids. And it really, every time I meet with the special education staff, I'm blown away at their dedication and creativity for the students of this district. Another area of need that I see looming in the future is addressing pandemic learning loss and the juxtaposition of that learning loss and possible over-identification of students for special education services. That is trickling in a little bit right now with, you know, I think we're all very concerned about learning loss, and you know, students lost time in the spring, and we are balancing the, you know, the need to go forward with evaluations, but we're also having to grapple with what is learning loss and what is potentially a disability. So it's very challenging, and you know, more to come. I'm hopeful that we will continue to receive more detailed guidance from that on that issue from the Agency of Education. Communication with families. So we have some strengths and challenges in this area. A lot of the direct feedback that I got from special education staff, the main theme in the feedback was they feel that they really have more contact with families than ever in this context, in this environment, which is, I was surprised by that. And I think that feedback was really interesting in that people are reporting that they have more opportunity to build trusting and collaborative relationships with families. I think that there is a level of intimacy with the remote Zooming that we are doing for the special education students who have elected remote instruction, or whose parents who have elected remote instruction for them. And I think that, I'm hearing about some really amazing relationship building and things like parents are having an opportunity to see specialized instruction in real time as they're doing that type of Zooming or virtual service time with their kids. And I think that I'm hopeful that students and families and our teachers are learning from that. A couple other points at the early childhood level, we're providing summaries to families directly about service delivery times. Our staff is incorporating use of email and also the Remind app, Google Voice. Several special education teachers have set up phone numbers through Google Voice so that they can text frequently with families, as that's a preferred method of communication. Balancing that technology overload is a strength and a challenge. I think that our staff are very mindful of parents who are worried about this new environment and how we might have too much screen time. And some of our related service providers have created websites that they share with families so that they can do that asynchronous time with their children on, not on a schedule, that they have activities to do that are related to student IEP goals and objectives. For example, one of our behavior interventionists who works with the intensive services continuum has developed a website that is super user-friendly for families, and they can go and see examples of the types of activities that the school staff are doing with the kids so that they can replicate that at the home, in the home environment. Our occupational therapist has also built a website with lots of OT activities too. So it's just creative. I'm very impressed, and I'm very impressed with what our staff has been able to do during this very challenging time. Some of the challenges in our communication are balancing the stress level of families with the need for student engagement. And so while a great majority of our staff and families are enjoying robust communication at a pretty high level, we do still have a small percentage of families who are struggling to connect and maintain those connections. So we want to be respectful and mindful of the challenges that families are under right now. And they are, some families are under a great deal of stress. And we want our students to be engaged and to be receiving instruction, but sometimes sometimes families need a break. And so I think that our staff are really learning how to navigate that in a respectful and appropriate way. But it does, it's challenging. It's hard to not be with our students every day and as we used to be. Some district-wide challenges for communication that are a little more long-term goals. Our central office special education webpage needs some updating, and as part of monitoring from the office, OSEP, or the federal special education programs, I meet with the special ed directors once a week, and we've been talking about expectations for district websites. And so that work is ongoing, and I am not a website expert in creating web pages, but I'm fairly computer literate. And so this is kind of a bigger central office initiative that we're talking about with our central office team. And I have a lot of ideas of, you know, how to make our website a little more user-friendly for families so that they can get information and also link to resources. That's been lacking from our website. And so I am actively working on that to improve it. And then also exploring opportunities for increased parental input and collaboration at the SU level. We have some parents who are interested in the possibility of forming like an advisory council for special education, and that's definitely on my radar, and it's on our administration's radar as well. So challenges, one of the questions was about, you know, how we're addressing challenges within the pandemic. So one of my biggest worries and challenges within this time is really about special education evaluations. We lost the ability to finish, complete, initiate evaluations as soon as school closed in March. And we were not able to do in-person evaluations again because of health and safety restrictions until early September was when we started up again. And so that's a challenge because we do have rules that we have to follow, and we have to finish our evaluations, especially initial evaluations, within a certain time frame. So it's a huge challenge, and we have had to develop extensive safety protocols and guidelines to do in-person evaluations. We've done that in consultation and collaboration with our COVID coordinators over the summer to make sure that everybody is safe. When we have evaluators that work with us from outside of the district, there's like a second layer of protection and protocol and waivers, and making sure everybody has the proper PPE and making sure we have plexiglass. It's, you know, there's a lot of logistics that I and my my other administrators here, it's like, you know, learning a whole new job. But I'm very aware of the fact that we have this obligation to finish the evaluations that we didn't finish in the spring, and we are really charging through the backlog. The West evaluation team has really, you know, again, gone above and beyond in trying to get this information out to families because it's very important. Other challenges that were reported by staff specifically, you know, it's a challenge to try to do things like occupational therapy remotely, right? So we're limited in the scope and practice of what can be provided remotely. That has resulted, and we're still doing this work on an ongoing basis, trying to be very creative about how to deliver services within the footprint that we have for general education. So that is, you know, that's just the nature of the pandemic climate right now. Another challenge is that collaboration time. I think that because certain people are working remotely, certain people are working in person, there's really, the time is very, I think our staff is missing that collaboration time as much as they used to have when it was, you know, in typical school. So that's, our staff reported that as being, you know, a real barrier and a real challenge. Responsibilities, unfortunately, for special educators have increased during this time. We had to amend and modify IEPs for every student this fall, which is somewhat typical in when we return to school. We do amendments to IEPs based on schedule changes. It's usually pretty minor, but because of what we're faced with now, we have had to create service pages for IEPs based on different scenarios. So we have a hybrid service, a service page for kiddos who are in a hybrid model, a service page for kiddos who are in a remote model, and then we have a contingency service page in case at the drop of a hat we have to go remote. And so that was a heavy lift for our staff in the month of September. We had a deadline, and I think families worked very hard with our staff to meet that deadline and to make sure that we were providing IEP services with that parental input, because their input is so important in our work. Teaching across different modalities was reported as being a challenge. You know, special educators are doing in-person work and they're doing remote work, so it's not one or the other, and crossing those modalities has been a real learning curve and a challenge, one which they have embraced. And again, I can't speak enough to the creativity and dedication of the staff to overcome those barriers and challenges. Staffing, I mentioned that in the previous slide. We do, it's not just about substitutes. We have had a hard time filling positions, especially for special education paraeducators. And that does affect our ability to provide more in-person service. So, we're still actively trying to find and recruit staff to join our team. And then last but not least here, limitations to grouping due to safety protocols. I think that, the staff at the school level and the principals could, maybe speak more to this, but I think that because we are trying not to mix pods of kids for contract tracing purposes, that's a tongue twister, we don't have the ability to group kiddos like we used to when we were doing services for special ed kids. So that's also been reported as a challenge. But to end on an area of celebration, the staff who I asked these kind of anecdotal questions to, they had a lot to say that was really encouraging and things that we should celebrate. So overall, there are many students who are thriving in the models that we're working under, whether it's hybrid or remote. And that is obviously not every student, but there are some students for whom the remote modality has been really helpful in decreasing anxiety and or helping with maybe a student who might have some significant behavior issues in in-person school. We've seen a change in that different remote modality, but for students for whom that is more successful, there's the opposite effect as well. So we balance that out. The increased flexibility of the daily schedule has reportedly been really beneficial for some students, and case managers have, they do have a level of flexibility where they're able to schedule services with families remotely that, it's not so rigid in this new environment. So that was reported by teachers to be really helpful for some kids. And one sentiment, oops, I'm gonna make sure I can read it here, is one teacher said, parents are gaining a better understanding of what, how, and why we do what we do. And so I heard a lot of stories and anecdotes about just relationship building with families, and especially around, for some students who have a higher level of need, I'm hearing about a lot of great collaboration with related service providers, special education teachers, and families, and really being able, to see each other and talk to each other sometimes on a daily basis. It sounds like for some kiddos that is really working. Staff reported being very well prepared by the professional development that we have been providing for reading instruction. I'll take a little bit of credit for that, but I also think that that is, you know, the hard work of the Curriculum and Assessment Office as well. And I know that school, at the school level, there is some, you know, PD being talked about at staff meeting, and that staff are also doing on their own. Another area to celebrate is, you know, it's kind of been forced on us, but teachers and students are really showing an increased proficiency in assistive technology. And I had, you know, I had a teacher talk about how her proficiency has really increased, and that she feels much more, you know, when we get back to some semblance of normal here in public school, that she really has learned so much about the tools that are out there for assistive technology for students, so that they can have greater access, and that's been a real, you know, bonus in her time doing remote learning. And then troubleshooting ways to provide additional access and supports for our most vulnerable students. So again, I'm really proud of the way that everyone is working together to think outside the box for students with high needs. And it's been, you know, it's been an area that I'm proud of. There's always room to grow, and there's always, you know, barriers will continue to present themselves. But I feel that, you know, given the circumstances, we are, you know, our staff is really rising to the occasion. So that's all I have for you. That's all.
Yeah, that's all. As you were maybe not even halfway through, I realized we probably should have broken this into at least 4 separate sessions, because it's just so much. I mean, that was a wonderful overview, but there's so much, and it's really kind of amazing. And I know we're not quite done, but we're going to talk a little bit about staffing and how to address some of the challenges that you talked about in just a few minutes. I wanted to ask their board if they have questions, and we do, and the public as well. If you put your hand up, I always call on the board members first, but hopefully it won't be too many until the public can participate as well. So I guess we'll go directly to questions. Tim.
Okay, that was one of the best reports I've heard all year. That was a fantastic report, Shelley. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have a lot of questions, but first, I'd like to get your thoughts on 173 points out that Vermont has 3 times the averages of special ed population than neighboring states. We have, there's been a 75% increase in IEPs in the last 6 or 7 years. What are your thoughts on the reasons for that?
Well, I think that I'll try to be as succinct as possible. I mean, I think it's a variety of factors, and I don't want to disagree with those facts and figures, because I know they're accurate, but I think that you know, Vermont does have some ways of identifying special education students that are a little bit different than neighboring states, which sometimes results in higher rates of eligibility and sometimes doesn't. So, and you probably don't want me to get too into the details of like the adverse effect piece, but Vermont is one of the only states that has the way that we define that gate 2 is pretty different than other states. That being said, we also have, we identify students with specific learning disability differently than a lot of other states as well. In our regs, we use the discrepancy model, which is a numbers, well, I don't want to be glib about it, but it's a numbers game. And so, you know, it's like a score here and a score here. And if there's a difference, you qualify as learning disabled. And so that has its, you know, I don't know how I feel about that. Most other states use like an RTI model for identification of specific learning disability. I think that I know that Vermont has historically had very high rates of identifying students with emotional disturbance, and I'm not sure if that's in that report or not. But I think that our district over the last 4 or 5 years, started by the director before me, really taking a hard look at that particular disability category and making sure that we are not over-identifying students. I think Vermont has a rate, well, and this is public, so I don't want to mess up my figures, but I want to say it's maybe 2 or 3 times the national average in that disability category. And our last child count, we were actually about half of the state average in that category. So that shows me that we're doing a good job. We're making sure we're not over-identifying students. And then lastly, I'll just say that I think that we have to make sure that we are allowing students with disabilities access to high quality core instruction. And, that has been a goal, that's a goal of our district, and that starts in the classroom. And our classroom teachers, we have some very talented classroom teachers in this district who are very, willing, able, and proficient in providing the differentiation that students need. But we still have work to do.
Thanks. I have more questions, but I'll let other people speak.
Okay. Oh, thanks, Tim. Jackie?
Mine's not a question. It's something that I've been looking for the right moment to say. It was just about a year ago that I came to a board meeting, and I wasn't a board member at the time, as kind of a representative of some families of students enrolled in special education, with a list of concerns that we had. And the right way to say this, I'm just so impressed that Shelley and Liz decided to take this on after knowing about that list of grievances and the general feeling among some parents about, that maybe special education wasn't going in the direction they wanted it to go in. And so just a little update. First of all, Shelley and Liz, thank you, because that's a big undertaking, and thanks for being willing to stick with us and try to help things improve, and also doing it during the time of COVID. And it's only been a few short months, and the feedback I've gotten from the families I've talked to, from a lot of them, has been so positive, because the chief concern that I heard was about difficult communication. And I've heard a lot of really, really good things, and I'm just so impressed and thrilled and just thankful that you have stuck with us. Like I said, despite that negative report that I gave a year ago, at the time I was feeling, concerned about my daughter enrolling in special education in Brattleboro, and I don't feel that way now. So I'm just really thankful for the work that you've done, and thanks for sticking with us. And, she's not even 2, so stick around longer, please.
Thanks so much, Jackie. Your words are very kind, and I really appreciate it. I think that it would be disingenuous to say that I did not, I'm a community member. I'm aware. I was very aware of some of the feelings of parents in our district, and as someone who has worked here, pretty much my whole career, I really feel strongly about making that right, and putting the time and effort into being present at the IEP meeting level, reaching out to families, and problem solving. It's the cornerstone of the work that we do, and we can't do it without parents.
Thank you. Any other board members, any other board questions? I think we're going to, probably because of the amount of information, we're probably going to want to have Shelley come back in a few months and maybe give us an update on how it's going with the challenges, and how things are developing. And also, one of the things that I'm reminded of the outdoor education presentations that we had, and the thought about tracking that contact with parents under COVID, and see if you can find ways to articulate the advantages that have come from the remote access, because it may be something that we want to include because it has that positive effect. Just what are we learning that's useful? What do we not want to forget once this is gone? So Krista Yagin?
Hi there.
Hi.
Shelley, and I just want to thank you for your great presentation. I thought it was clear and accessible, and you really took the time to explain things. So thank you. And I also appreciate the COVID silver linings. You kind of alluded to that right now, but there's some things that we're learning that, that are growing us, as you said, technology. My question is about just continuing the conversation. This was extremely helpful. We have a large percentage of our student population who have IEPs or who receive special education. And it's been confusing, hard for me that it comes under a different kind of umbrella. And so it's not typically part of this school board's conversation. And I would love it. I think it would be helpful for it to be a part of this conversation. So my question is there a current committee that we have that special education could be a part of that already exists, or is there a way to have special education be more a part of our regular conversations? That's my first question. I can come back after though.
Well, let me just respond quickly to that, because I think, we hadn't had this this presentation earlier because we've had so many other things to do, obviously, going along, but it's been on the list of important things. And I think getting regular at least I'm going to try to get every 6 weeks or every three or four meetings, get regular updates from special ed and regular updates on the commitment to social justice that the board took on as well, because these are obviously really important programs and they're not in our regular order because it is an SU program. But we do have a lot of kids, and so we're gonna certainly keep it regularly on the board agenda. So that's a start.
Thank you. Shelley, do you have any additional thoughts about that?
Yeah, I do, Krista. I think that I imagine that we touched on the implications of Act 173. I probably didn't emphasize the positive. there are a lot of positive things that come with the special ed funding change, which is a little, to be succinct, some of the rigidity around, special education staff only being able to work with certain students and they must be on IEPs. There is like a relaxation of some of those rigidities that get in our way sometimes when we're trying to provide that high quality instruction to the students who need it most. And so I think that I imagine how we are implementing the changes in Act 173 as a district would be a topic to be revisited here at the SD level. And then how that, I'm thinking, how can that discussion occur in the context of the existing leadership councils that are at each school? That would certainly be, I think, an appropriate venue to address that, but also, exploring having that type of conversation at the SU board level as well. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about that as well.
Thank you for that. I just had one other follow-up question. Some parents have noted that their students have missed out on a lot of services. And I was curious, for those families, what would you say in terms of the plan for compensatory services and how they should go about expressing that concern, or what does that mean?
Yeah, so I think those discussions and questions are always a best. Sorry, I've been talking so long, my mouth is real dry. I think those are all, those questions are best addressed at the IEP team level. And I think that parents should, start with their child's case manager if they have questions about compensatory services and if their child would be eligible for that. Students on IEPs are eligible for compensatory services if there's been a lack of FAPE. And I think that the people that make the rules are compensatory services can occur even without the context of the pandemic. And there's a structure and a way that you would offer that at the IEP team level. I think that what we have talked about as a district in our leadership teams is that when we are able, we will need to be providing services to all kids for a variety of different things: reading, math, writing, social, emotional, due to the fact that, learning loss has occurred for everyone. And so, by way of example, like when I start the special ed budget planning, which I think, Frank asked me to get on that, because ours is the first part of the budget to be presented, I'm going to be mindful of making sure that our extended year services budget includes, a higher level of funding so that we can offer more, hopefully next summer we'll be able to offer expanded extended year services to try to help mitigate some of the loss of learning that our students on IEPs have had.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up to Tim's point, just about I would say some of the constraints in our special education regulations that impact eligibility. Have you, the special education rules are open right now. Have you considered giving comment to those and any recommendation to changes in our Vermont special education rules?
I have not thought about that recently, but it's certainly, I work with WSESD, our professional organization of special ed administrators, and I'm sure that they have been involved in that public comment. But yes, I'll certainly look into that.
It ends in December, just to say, and I think your points about some of the constraints are worth sharing.
Thanks.
Thanks. Tara Castine? Tara? We're not hearing you. I see you're unmuted, but we're not hearing you. Well, I'm going to go to Tim, and then we'll come back to Tara.
Okay, just a quick question about staffing. So 173 calls for extra instruction outside core subjects by highly skilled teachers. That's great. But Shelley, what's your thought? Do we have existing staff whose workloads can be expanded, or are we going to be needing to recruit more special ed teachers from within the state?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I think that the answer has to, I think ideally is given in concert with general education resources, because it really has to do with what are the resources that we have financially and otherwise, and then how do we reallocate them to make sure that we have staff that can provide that high quality instruction, not just to students on IEPs, but for students who struggle, because that's the intent of the DMG report and 173. Act 173 is not just about special education. It's really about, students who struggle. And so I feel somewhat hopeful that we can reallocate existing resources to some extent to create some of those, whether it's new positions or a shift in positions. Ideally, I'd like to fill all the positions we have. That would be a goal first, because we still do have vacant positions in special education right now. And, it's a very, we compete very heavily with neighboring districts for high quality staff. And, the last I knew, special ed teachers were not designated as a shortage by the licensing office, but I feel we should be. So I think that did I answer your question, Tim? I'm sorry.
No, yes, it does. And don't hesitate to suggest to the board any ways that we can help in reallocating positions and recruiting special ed.
Actually, I think that's actually, I think, sort of in a sense coming up in the next part of the administrative reports.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead, Tara.
Oh, yes. I figured out how, I have a new computer, so the microphone wasn't done. I just wanted to say thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. I do want to say that I'm looking forward to the web page that you're talking about, because as a parent with an IEP and talking to other parents, knowing what's available and how to get help is one of the biggest questions that gets asked. And what are the requirements for them to meet in order to get that help? Because sometimes people will say they need help, but then it's put off because they haven't actually written it out and done the 30-day notice to the school that you're requesting it. So having that detail available for parents is going to be very impressive. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions, and I think, Andy, this might be a pretty good transition into the update. I think, or the, I can't find it here on the agenda, but the staff thoughts.
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Shelley alluded to most of this in her presentation and in answers to the questions. So really, and Frank can talk a little bit more about this. He mentioned this with the Finance Committee earlier this evening. Our thoughts around staffing really tie into Act 173, and so the Act 173 is supposed to start for FY23. So as we're looking at ramping up, the degree of preparations necessary to make sure that we have the best professionals, certified educators in schools in front of students and working with staff is going to be one of our critical priorities in terms of our staffing model for next year. And so that's work that we're starting to do right now. That will be captured in our budgeting process in terms of what that looks like, and whether that's looking at reallocating resources, analyzing our resources, and utilizing this to come in as effectively as possible to meet the demands of the Act. As Shelley's talked about, it's really, Act 173 isn't just a special ed issue or act, it's really it hits general education students as well. And so we know coming out of the pandemic, we're gonna have some rather significant needs around learning. And we're gonna need to make sure that we're working on how are we addressing those needs in what we call the tier 1 or the classroom setting. And a lot of that's going to involve capacity development for our faculty, but making sure that we have the skilled educators working alongside with their educators, so that learning model is not just in sessions after school, but it's throughout the course of the day as well. And so we embrace this idea of professional learning as both an in-person during the day and an after-school type of a setting.
Thanks, Andy. Just when we do get to talking a little bit more about 173, there's the report that Shelley mentioned. I think it's 9 pages long, and I think the third or the fourth page, it talks about school boards and school district responsibilities. And then the next 4 pages are all the things that the Agency of Education promises to support or to provide in terms of support. And aside from the lack of staff and resources, it's hard to imagine that the agency is going to be able to provide all of those things. But I'm going to want to look really carefully at that and make sure that they're doing the things that they promise, as well as before they require us to. If they're not providing that support for us to be successful, I think we need to be pushing back. But I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. We'll talk about 173 in more depth later on. But it's not unusual to get a bill from the legislature that gives us a lot of responsibilities, a lot of promises, and costs a lot of money, and then we wind up not getting any support in any way. So that's my little soapbox for the evening. Did Frank have anything to add on that, or Frank, anything, any updates in fiscal report?
Yeah, we had a finance committee meeting this evening
right.
at 5.
Right,
And
great.
so, yeah, why don't I defer my comments to Sean and the committee, and then if folks have questions, I'm glad to contribute anyway.
Great, thank you. Is there anything else? Let Shelley and Liz and the other coordinators go to bed. Great, thank you very much, Shelley. That was quite an effort.
Thanks,
I really
everybody.
appreciate it. And we'll be a lot more specific and than so general the next time. But it's great background for people now. So thank you.
Very good. Thanks a lot.
Committee reports. The first thing under leadership councils, before we do the reports, I want to point out Andy and I had a conversation this week about a couple of things, and one of them was to have ask the principals to share their budget requests with the leadership councils. I don't know if it's possible this year because we're kind of late into the season, but to share those before they actually come to the board. If that's not possible, that's fine. But just for the leadership councils to be part of that process. In the future, we'll make sure that they're the scheduling is such that that can be done every time. But we wanted to ask leadership councils to have a look at those budget requests. So anyway, leadership councils that met, any reports? Please put your blue flag up, or your blue hand up, so I can recognize you. Oh, Jackie, go ahead.
Green Street did meet, but I unfortunately missed it. But I did at least want to say that they met, and okay. I apologize for missing it.
Great, thanks. We'll look at the minutes. Great, thank you, Sean.
Yes, I was going to mention at the last meeting about the Guilford Leadership Council, and they're going to have a meeting. I hope I have the date right. It's Thursday, November 19th, 6:30 to 7:30, and that's Beth Bristol mentioned that at our last meeting here, and it's to try to get, make sure that all people that want to be involved can be. So it's going to be an evening meeting, and they're going to do that quarterly. So that'll be Thursday, the 19th of November.
Great.
And the council has not met since.
Great, thank you. Michelle Dummerston?
Yep. So Dummerston actually moved their meeting to this past Monday so that we could have a conversation about the climate crisis proposal. So besides that, there was conversation around our fundraising and meeting the needs of our students with winter gear, working on community for kids that are spread out. But most of the conversation, it was a really wonderful, I'm really glad that I was able to go back and really hear firsthand just feedback from a lot of people on that. And most of it, I think we're going to talk about that later, so I won't get into it all. But there was a lot of big feelings about it, and that was the bulk of our meeting.
Great, thank you. Kelly Young?
So the BUHS Leadership Council did meet, I believe it was last week, but I was unable to make it, and I don't know if Steve would be able to, if he was able to go, and if he would be able to speak to that.
Sure. We met for about an hour last Wednesday afternoon. We covered a lot of ground. A lot of our conversation really focused on defining what the role of the Leadership Council is. The members are very interested in kind of getting some direction and some consistency district-wide. At the same time, recognizing that we do need to remember that every school has a unique personality that we also need to respect along the way. We also spent some time talking about ways to build community with parents and how a leadership council could take a lead role in parent education through evening meetings on different topics that they'd solicit parent input on what those might be. And then we talked a little bit about the kernel name and the controversy over the summer that's still kind of simmering. The fact that we probably at some point need to address the kernel name in a bigger forum than just a leadership council. And Ricky and I are gonna work on that in the next few weeks and bring that back to our leadership council. That's a pretty quick summary.
Great, thank you, Steve. I also, Mark Spino, I see you're still here. Would you mind giving us a little update on the Green Street meeting? I think it was last night or recently, Monday.
Yeah, we met on Monday. Talked about a lot about events that we've had in place to keep our community together. We hosted a spooky story night over Zoom, which is a tradition we've done for many years. The first year we've done it on Zoom. I did a winter coat exchange for our families. And then we hosted a trunk or treat event for our families as well this past weekend. Leadership Council asked a lot of questions about how they could help and support our staff. So we talked a bit about that, how important positive reinforcement is. And then we talked a bit about the changes we've made in our arrival routines. We've been doing our checks outdoors. We're moving that to indoors now because of the temperature change. And we talked a bit about outdoor education and things that we've been doing and being proactive around. And then we did have a discussion around budget development. That's a quick summary.
Thank you, that's great. Ruby McAdoo, Putney.
Putney Central School Leadership Council. We have not met since the last meeting. We're meeting tomorrow at 4:30, and this will be the first meeting with our newly appointed leadership council members. Thank you, board, for doing that. And essentially, our key work at this point is organizing what are our goals for the year. So I think I'm pretty excited about. I think our leadership council is really getting our feet underneath us in terms of identifying specific projects and tasks that we think we can achieve. So if anyone, I think it is warned, so if anyone's interested in joining, that'd be great. We still, as a leadership council, are very eager to connect with other leadership councils in a formal or informal way, or even just chair to chair, just knowing who everyone else is to kind of bounce ideas off each other and learn from what others are doing. That's all.
Thank you. Emily.
So I'm not reporting out on the Leadership Council. Our next meeting is next week for Academy School, but I just had a question. Actually, it was a few folks ago. So for Michelle, I just wanted to hear about, you had talked about really thinking about how to build community, and it made it sound like maybe you were talking about it related to remote learners. I might have misinterpreted, so you can just tell me if I did, but if you were talking about community for remote learners, was there anything you could share that you think maybe could help the other schools? Because I've heard from a bunch of parents who are students are remote learners, there's not a lot because, it's hard, everybody's online. So was there anything there, like tidbits?
Yeah, and my notes are buried. And the conversation, this topic has come up, I think, a few times at our meetings. I think it's something that most of the schools are sort of grappling at, trying to figure out how to connect. I see Julianne just chimed in, so she probably is holding it all a lot more here than I am. Julianne, if you want to share a summary of conversations we've had, I would appreciate it.
Sorry, I just stepped away for a second to let my dog out. But I think the question is about our discussions about supporting remote learners. We've just been working on trying to really utilize our counselor, Erica Garnett, to really stay connected with our remote learners. And then she's in the process now of using the asset team, you know, especially for our middle school students, to give students a way to connect with their peers who are in the hybrid schedule. So they'll have Zoom sessions with Erica that will be hybrid students plus fully remote students. We also have our fully remote students, of course, connected to our specials instruction, and we're working on figuring out ways that we can use our newly implemented developmental designs curriculum to have kind of some sort of all school virtual meetings that allow both those communities to come together. So those are some very general ideas.
I love the family backgrounds. Thank
I have
you.
a young dog who this is her time of day to play.
Yeah. Great. Did that answer your question, Em? Are you all set? Okay, great. Ruby, if you could be brief, please. We got still have business to do.
Yep. Emily, I wanted to chime in because we have also talked about that and had some very specific ideas that might be helpful for people. I think we're considering and would like to implement a class parent kind of structure so that each class has a class parent, and that parent could help to facilitate connections between the cohorts, both the two hybrid cohorts and the remote. And then another idea, which isn't as well formed, is a monthly dash that would go to remote kids that could include letters from their peers that are in hybrid and gifts from the classroom to help them to feel connected. Those are the things that I think we hadn't heard of before, but were ideas that we had. That's all.
Thank you. Mary?
Yep, just wanted to give the Oak Grove update. We met on the 27th. It was a rescheduling of a meeting that most people couldn't attend. So we did a lot of updates about what was happening at school. And then we also looked at the role of the Leadership Council and talked about some goals for the next meeting, which budget development was one of those. And we're also looking, we have a few members who are looking at ways to engage parents because we're missing out on like all school sing times where families could join in and connect with one another that way. So we have a few members creating a survey or ways to engage with parents in different ways. So we had an update on that, and we're continuing to work on that project. And our next meeting is on the 10th of November.
Thank you. Any other Leadership Council updates? I just wrote down to see if I can to contact the chairs, or at least the board members, and find out who all the chairs are, and then contact them and see if we can't set up a Zoom meeting for them to get together, do some brainstorming, and maybe some ongoing communication. So I'll work on that and see if we can put something together for next week. Well, thank you for the information and the suggestions. The WSESD SU Diversity Equity Committee. Ann, did you folks meet?
Has not met. They continue to meet in their groups.
Great, thank you. Sean, Finance Committee report.
Yes, we met just before this meeting at 5 o'clock. And basically what we did is we had an agenda that included the budget planning discussion as the second item. The first one was just passing the minutes of March 4th when our last meeting was, because we've kind of been coupled by the pandemic somewhat. So it was the budget planning was really good. We had as everybody's already seen, the budget timeline, and Frank went over that in detail. And we started on the bewitching day of March 16th, which is the tentative annual meeting for the budget presentation, and that'll be the warrant meeting where all the warrants are brought somehow before the public. And then Frank worked back to where we are today. And so there, Frank had laid out the budget timeline and then the initial guiding principles of the budget. And then Frank talked about the favorable fund balance, which is really an excellent thing to have available right now as we go forward. And then talked about the capital plan, and Frank showed us how the capital plan will be implemented and all the things that have been happening due to the COVID, all the ventilation work that's being done. And then one of the biggest things is the work at Dummerston that will have to be completed for the heating system. And also spoke a little bit about the academy project and where that is now, which is sort of in a state of flux because of the pandemic, but it's still on the burner. And that was about it. I did have one comment about the warrants. If you look at the warrant, I think it's the October 13th. There was a big number on that. $1,835,675.21. And that is a payment for the bond for the BUHS and Putney. So that includes both payments. The payment of the BUHS is $1,600,000, I believe. We're getting down, as Frank mentioned in the last meeting, getting down on that. So anyway, it's always kind of good to see that expenditure because we're getting towards the end of it, at least on the BUHS. The Putney will be longer, but I think it's kind of interesting to look at that big number and realize what it's for. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Personnel Committee? Doesn't sound like the Personnel Committee met.
Didn't we meet, David, to approve some hires?
David?
Yes.
So
Go ahead, Kelly.
I've just gotten a message from Barb recently that there are some 1% that need to be addressed. And so we will be scheduling a meeting for the Personnel Committee sometime soon.
Great, thank you. Policy and Amendment Committee, I don't believe has met yet.
No, but I'm still waiting to hear back from some people about meeting next week.
Yeah, I saw that today. Thank you. And the PPEC meeting meets next week. Emily, a little update or any comment?
Sure. So PPEC is meeting next Tuesday at 5:30. That's a different time and a different day of the week. So if people are planning to attend, just make note. And we have a bunch of guests joining, so that's exciting. Chris Sawyer and Steve Perrin will be joining we were asked to revamp a little bit of our proposal around the Title IX. So they're going to be joining and helping us with that, which we appreciate. And then Paul Smith will also be joining as the PPEC was looking into kind of a little bit of how remote learning is going on, and especially for those students who do not have internet. And so I know Paul will be coming and telling us, what's going on there and how we can, help to support that and get that, get that work moving along. So if anybody wants to join, you're welcome to join.
That's on Tuesday the 10th?
Tuesday the 10th at 5:30.
Thank you, Emily. The Climate Crisis Task Force, don't believe you met in the last week, did you? I don't
No,
think.
we're waiting till after
Okay.
we discuss this stuff.
And Communications Council?
Yeah, so we haven't met. We're actually just having a really hard time coordinating a meeting time. But we have a pretty huge agenda. I think we're trying to schedule something for either next Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. And we have a big agenda, including things like developing a communication calendar, especially with the budget coming up. And actually on my list, David, is what can we do to help coordinate and put together leadership councils. So if you want me to work on trying to just getting a list and contact information for everyone, it was basically already on my to-do list.
Great. That would be great. If you would, yeah, just send that to me when you get it. That would be fantastic. Thank you. Great. And the also the Communications Council talked about getting a professional review for the website, and then hearing the special ed conversation. They're looking at updating theirs too. So it seems to make sense to try to coordinate, or to make sure that that's all happening, and to coordinate with administration on that. Social Justice Committee met on Monday, I believe, Thomas?
The previous one, and we discussed more about the progress we've made on interviewing people about possible training resources. Our next meeting is the last Monday of this month, which I believe is the 23rd at 4:30. We might have one before then to have a meeting with a final prospective vendor before that. And hopefully we'll have all the information we need to make a decision on at least who to go with and start the process of getting that done.
That's on the last Monday, which is...
I thought the 23rd.
It's the 30th.
The Monday before Thanksgiving.
Oh, okay. So, the last...
4:30.
Yeah, the last Monday is actually the 30th. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought, okay. The 23rd, yeah. The Monday right before Thanksgiving.
Great. Thank you. And the WSESD board.
Do you mean SU?
SU, thank you, Carrie.
You are welcome.
Do.
We have not met, but I would put everybody on notice that given budget, it's coming soon.
Great. Thank you. Okay, that's we're done with committee reports. On to the unfinished business, the Climate Crisis Task Force proposal. We are now taking that up from the table and discussing again possible action. The table motion to have the Policy and Amendments Committee develop policies related to the ongoing climate crisis. And I'm going to put up the document that went out with the agenda. And what I did was took the 5 points that were the policy proposals and separated them from the recommendations, and I moved, I think, one part of a paragraph around to be part of the introduction. But basically what we're looking at is the 5 points. And tonight's conversation is going to be, let me get that up, is going to be on the question of, on the motion, which is whether to recommend this report to the committee to develop policy. So let me get that up on everyone's screen, and we'll briefly go through the points. And can everyone see that now in a reasonable manner?
Yep.
Okay, great, thank you. So this is the first priority is, or the first point to consider developing policy around is to educate and prepare our students for the future. The second is significantly reduce consumption. Do we need a policy to develop around that? And again, policies guide the actions of management. These are to guide the administration in managing the system. The third priority, protect students, staff, and our community from environmental harm, specifically from toxic substances. Number 4 is to preserve and regenerate current and future resources. And the 5th is the continual review of implementation. So those are the proposals. Those are the items that are up for discussion We're not going to be discussing whether students can get on airplanes or whether we're going to serve meat or any of the things that were in the recommendations, because they are not policy. They will not go to the policy committee. So these are the points that we will be discussing. And so I can put this back up anytime anybody wants to see it, but I would rather we see each other. So we'd like to have any comments before we move before we have a vote on the motion. First from board members. Sean?
Yeah, I would be interested in some clarification as to if we do move this to Policy and Amendment Committee, does the Policy Amendment Committee change this document, or is it just, does it go to the committee and then does it come right back to the board in the same form?
I think that the purpose of sending it to the committee is for them to explore it and see if it needs to be, how it might need to be changed, or whether it's adequate as presented to be policy, to put it into the form of policy. And that may be including whether it's even necessary or a good idea. I think the question for us tonight is, are these the things we want? These were recommended by the committee, the things that they thought were the points that we should be considering policy for. And the question to us is, do we send this on to the policy committee to do that work? Any other board members? Okay, Keith Lyman.
Maybe I should defer to Superintendent Skarzinski, and then maybe I go after him.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Andy, go ahead.
I think a couple things within the priority items, David. I think one about educating students, I would encourage the board look at the aspects of the next gen science standards. If we think about the elements of science and the standards that we're obligated to follow as adopted by the Vermont Board of Ed, all fall under the NGSS. It might behoove us to hear from some of the science teachers at some point down the road about what NGSS are, because they're different. It's a three-dimensional between disciplinary core ideas, engineering and engineering principles, and cross-cutting concepts, which would bring in other items. And so if we think about the critical thinking skills we want students to walk away with to be problem solvers and solution-oriented, I would advocate that we pursue that. And so I would think that we may want to do a little bit more of a deeper dive around curriculum first, and what teachers are required, what we're required to make sure that everyone has. And the science practices are actually outstanding in terms of where we want to position ourselves as a country. The third one around protecting people from harmful substances, I think is already covered under Vermont statute under Act 68, which is the use of green cleaners in schools. So that piece may not necessarily need to go to the policy committee, because there's already existing statute around that the schools are obligated to follow.
Right. That may be the case. I think for both of those things, I would expect the committee would take those up and make those determinations rather than the board try to explore that now. I mean, we could just say that is that we are protected, but I think it's worth the policy committee looking into it and getting that information. So, and the same with curriculum. I mean, that work needs to be done. We need to understand what is going on, and this would be the process for doing that. Michelle?
So the word significantly concerns me, not because I don't want there to be goals and to be efforts to achieve goals, but I'm concerned about who determines what's significantly, and I'm concerned about what happens if we don't achieve those goals. I mean, I think each person may have a different idea of what significantly would be. So that word there, without further clarification or further sort of fleshing out of what the goals really are, concerns me.
Yeah, that would be also the work of the committee to identify what significantly means. So actually, and then to provide some guidelines so the administration would know what that means. So that was Kelly. Michelle, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm I think I'm also looking for clarification because I got a lot of really good feedback, and it is a little hard for me to wrap my mind around how much more this would be developed once it moves to policy and amendment. I think that as things are stated, the general themes are overwhelmingly supported by my immediate community that I was able to connect with. But there was just really valuable points that were brought up that I feel like were thoughts that needed to be developed. One of the really valid point was just considering the consistency that we could witness through our community and how we're talking about implementing something in our schools that may not even be attainable. For instance, Dummerston doesn't have a way to recycle if you don't pay for it and and pay for a special service. And just, thinking about how what that is to impress on young children who then have to go home and contradict what they're being told is the right thing to do or things like that. The more I looked at it, I started seeing more like black and white mandates versus like a broader policy. So I'm curious, I guess, about how much more development happens, but I was also thinking about at the last meeting, Sean had brought up and kind of compared this to the anti-racism social justice commitment. And I guess I am wondering what power versus constraints would benefit to, having something be a policy versus this being like a district goal that could be seen in a commitment form that's maybe not so binding, or give some flexibility back to the individual sites to be able to work with what they have and to find their own strategies to make changes. And I don't know who could best answer that, but I guess I'm wondering why we're approaching this as to be part of policy, if there's another option where it's, where it's, I guess I'm also, sorry, I had so many thoughts, and now that I'm speaking, I'm having a hard time just focusing on what the point is, but I see policy in education needing so much to focus on our objective of giving our kids the most quality education that they possibly can. And so this is like another step in a different direction. So I guess that's really, I'm just mostly just wondering why we aren't adopting this as sort of a commitment and fine tuning something like that versus making this like a set in stone rule for the district to follow. Anyone?
Yeah, I think that's what the policy committee would be charged to do, is to figure out is that the way to go. The climate crisis task force asked that these be that the board consider these as policies, as guidance, and so all the things that everyone has said so far about expanding and understanding and broadening what this means or clarifying what this means is all what would happen at the policy committee level, unless we wanted to take all of them up as a board and talk about them here and have all that information in this meeting. But I think that would be probably not the most efficient way to do it. Okay. But at any rate, the expectation is that the committee that's the committee's work.
Okay. So it's safe to look at these more like a generalized priorities, and because there's so many more steps before it actually turns into something. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, something as broad as educate and prepare our students for the future, we would certainly have to know, well, what are we doing now? And, how are we assessing that? And how even is the implementation of the standards? And all those things need to be explored. So it would probably involve other committees as well. There might be some work for the Programmatic Equity Committee as well. So, but there needs to be somebody working on it. And the recommendation from the committee is that it go to the policy committee. So Keith.
Yeah, I'm not doesn't sound like anybody's had a chance to do much with this since the last meeting, but Stephanie Pike had emailed me. She's in the meeting, but she has a really poor reception. So she asked if I could kind of read one of her message. And I think just to summarize it really quick first, the first bullet point, the second sentence raises a lot of flags for a lot of teachers. And I'm not sure if a lot of teachers have even been able to look at this given what they're dealing with right now. And it's the second sentence that draws a lot of questions for teachers. And I'm probably speaking on behalf, and she's speaking on behalf of a lot of teachers. So what she wrote is pretty brief, so I'll read it quickly here. Let's see, this assumes that we do not already focus as much as possible on informing students of the issues of climate change. There are multiple concepts in all content areas that must be addressed before we can teach concepts of climate change. I would also ask the wording to remove, quote, the climate crisis and solutions are central themes at every level, end quote, as this is not appropriate. I think that activism is highly inappropriate for the school board to be proposing. We're an education institution, not indoctrination stations. We inform students and foster personal interests through learning. In addition, let's address the practicality of revising curriculum, who will train, pay for, etc. With the current budget, that is not sustainable. So I might just kind of surmise that that one sentence is loaded with significant challenges for teachers as far as how they would implement that, and how would we implement this across as a central theme. And perhaps the recommendation might be to just take that sentence out. The first sentence is powerful. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, let me just point out again, these are the priorities that the committee established. They are not the policy. The policy committee would be the place that would be determined.
Okay.
These are recommendations for the policy committee to take up, or priorities for the policy committee. Kelly.
Hi, thanks. I want to make sure that everybody really hears that there has been a lot of work done with the NGSS standards within our district since they came about. That's been an important initiative for our schools. And I'm just wondering if the task force did interview any schools about what they've specifically done to meet the standards in this proposal. I feel like before anything goes to the policy committee, the schools need to be involved and have an opportunity to speak to what's already been done and what's being planned at the school level. Because there's a lot of really great things being done already, and I'm certainly in favor of all of the points in the proposal, but I just want to make sure that it reflects what's already going on in our district. And just kind of on a broader scope, whenever a task force like this is created with the goal being to provide vision and direction to our schools, the schools really need to be aware of it and involved in the work of that task force. Teachers could be stipended to be involved. I know that people would really be interested in doing that. And most of us had no idea that this task force even existed and that the proposal was being created. So I did bring it to the attention of the teachers at my school because I wanted them to know about it, but nobody knew. So I think it's just important for the board to hear that, you know, you're involved in these really great committees and all this work that you've put hours and hours into, but a lot of people don't know about it. So if you could share it more broadly with the teachers and staff, that would be really important.
Thanks, Kelly. Matt Betts.
Hi. First of all, I just want to thank you guys, y'all, for winnowing down your policy. It's, you know, in principle, things are looking good. Thank you, Stephanie, for what you wrote, and Michelle for what you said. I just want to make sure that the lens that when this committee does reconvene to look at curriculum, that you remember what you have in your ethics pledge, which says to recognize that the responsibility of the school board is to ensure that the schools are well run, but not to run them. And there's a real concern for me anyway, and I'm hearing it from some colleagues that by meddling in, or meddling, but working, getting into our curriculum it begins to blur that line a little bit, and that is a concern. And I really do look forward to helping to inform what we are doing and the rich curriculum that the next gen has guided us as science faculty throughout the district and what we've done. I honestly think you'll be very excited to hear what we're doing, but I really just want to make sure that you do include us in that conversation to find out what we're doing, and then step back and let us do our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Deb Cardane.
Yeah, I want to second a couple of things that were just said. One, that Kelly's point around people not really knowing this work that's going on, and then Matt's point. I just encourage you to reach out to our teachers and get into our classrooms. We, one of the silver linings of where we're at right now is that we've got this digital access to each other, and there are amazing things going on in classrooms, and it's pretty easy to connect with teachers and to connect with classrooms. And I think, we have a really big district, and it's really exciting that we have this board that's consolidated across towns. And I just would encourage you, before the work gets done separately from the classrooms, to really take time to get to know our teachers, what they're doing, what they already know, there's just so much exciting things happening. So I would urge you to take the time to do that. Thanks.
So I think it's apparent to me that the policy committee is certainly going to want to do that work. We have not had any presentations about science curriculum or assessments or any of the progress or any of these developments, and that's something that needs to happen anyway. But the policy committee is not going to be designing and assigning curriculum, so you can worry about it, but it's just not going to happen. Liz.
Yeah, I have, when I had the preschool, I was using next gen science standards, and I took the time to kind of dip into them at different grade levels because they're online. So David, your point is well taken, and as is that of the teachers, because there is a great deal of what this would be looking at already going on in our schools. So yeah, and I had some communications with some with a science teacher or two, and it seems like a lot of what they're already doing is what the committee was looking for, or the task force was looking for in the first place. So if any other committee member wants to dip into those standards, they're online and you can see them.
Just a reminder, once again, I'm going to put this up. So we're getting again away from the motion, which is whether to recommend these 5 priorities to the Policy and Amendments Committee for exploration and development, potentially development into policy. Just want to be really clear. This is what we're talking about. This is what the motion says. And a lot of the things have been raised are very good points, but they are not to the motion. And so I would ask you, please refer to the motion and not the general topic or other related topics. Kelly, again?
Yeah, I'm again concerned about maintaining the boundaries of our role. And it's been spoken to about from some other people. And I guess, I don't know if this is the proper point in this discussion or in regards to this, but I wondered if maybe, I know in some other formats, there's a public comment period, and though it's board meetings always have public comment periods, I wonder if we could, before any further action is really taken on that, if we could provide a period of time, because it doesn't seem like this is something that we need to deal with it by next week, or we need to deal with it by, you know, within the next 2 weeks, or, you know, that sort of thing. So it seems like we have a little bit of flexibility in timing. And so my suggestion is that there seem to be a lot of people that are concerned about these how this could go forward, and maybe we could put it out for public comment, as in people could send in emails, and that might be helpful for a helpful option for teachers, and it might be informative for the board, and or if it does go to the committee, they might be able to inform us as to what is actually being done now. And I don't think, if something's already being done, I don't think it's necessary to duplicate it. I think if there's something that we can do to acknowledge something or to strengthen something, then I think that that's certainly good. But I don't think if something's already being done or has been enacted, I don't think we need to make an effort to duplicate something. So that's my suggestion.
Just a reminder that the way that we, if we want to get public comment, well, we need to have a policy for people to comment on. So again, I ask people to please stick to the motion. Are these the points that do we want to forward these points from the committee to the policy and amendments committee to potentially develop policy? I'm going to go to people that haven't spoken to this yet. Anne? Nope, sorry, I unmuted Thomas. Anne?
Thank you, Dave. I would like to point out to everyone that this document as written doesn't resemble a policy at all. It would have to be entirely rewritten. So at this point, we're discussing theoreticals. Bouncing it to committee doesn't obligate us to pass it, and what you see before you will not be how it comes out. Just everyone's worried about the potential implications, but the implications haven't been written yet.
Thank you, Anne. That's exactly why we have a policy committee. Thomas?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate on the timeline of this. The title of it and the title of the task force is Climate Crisis. So the point is that it is urgent, and that the whole point of this proposal is that this is the topic that will define these children's generations and generations to come. We feel that it is so important that we have to take strong action for that reason. And that it's not, like I've said before, a lifestyle choice. This is addressing the most existential crisis in their lives. I just want to reiterate that point.
Emily and then Michelle.
I was actually going to ask Thomas about the timeline, but I guess the question for Thomas, and I hope this isn't way off because I know you're trying to keep it moving, David.
I just want it to be on the motion. Go ahead.
I'm not, well, I'm going to say it and you can tell me if I'm out of order.
Okay.
So, you know, this is going to move on to well, I hope that this will move on to the policy committee, but I guess I wondered, is there anything, because the intention was from Thomas's committee that this would be taken into account, or some of these points would be taken into account. Is there anything, Thomas, that you wanted to be taken into account as we are thinking about this future year? But maybe that's way off topic.
Yep, it is. It definitely is. I mean, I'm not going to, Thomas can answer if he would like, but it's definitely off topic.
It's okay if it's off topic, not right now.
Yeah, so just one more thing about the first one where we talk about curriculum, because that seems to be the one that everyone feels most sensitive about. That's the one that I've had teachers and been able to hear personal feedback from many of our administrators. And I feel like it's that word revised. Revised implies change, and that doesn't feel appropriate. And, you know, if it was written as, you know, curricula will support climate crisis and solutions as central themes as is appropriate. I just wonder if that wouldn't feel more peaceful moving forward and not have to feel so stressful for people, and fill them with more concern that people don't need to be carrying around right now. Just simple word change, that support instead of revise.
Support. Personally, I'd be perfectly fine with that. It's totally the intention of the paragraph.
Right, but this is the document that was presented. The policy committee is going to change, as Ann pointed out. The policy committee will change it. I can't imagine that those things won't be, the things that have been mentioned here won't be taken into consideration because we're all here. Everybody here on the policy that's on the policy committee is hearing them, and
all right.
But you know,
throw a little addendum at the bottom, and the every level is as appropriate, you know, to honor the experts and the way that they feel that we should approach. I don't know. Okay.
Yeah. Right. Andy.
Yeah, I think it's just relevant too, and as Ann has spoken to, that this is going to be really broken into 5 separate policies that would govern business issue, or up to 5 to cover each of the different points. And so you have the issues around student learning, which may or may not come to pass because we already have established curricula. A happy, you know, to Michelle's earlier question, a happy medium may be coming up with a strongly worded, you know, resolution that says we believe in that climate crisis is an existential threat. And as such, we have embraced the next gen science standards, as well as the portrait of a graduate to encourage students that are problem solvers and critical thinkers. And that may be that kind of happy balance to really emphasize it, catch the ideals of this, while at the same time also not creating something that's so durable that may be difficult or you know, may not meet the metrics of the policy requirements.
Thank you. Okay, the motion is to have the Policy and Amendments Committee develop policies related to the ongoing crisis, climate crisis, and the 5 specific points. That's the recommendation to the Policy and Amendments Committee. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of forwarding the policy to the Policy and Amendments Committee, the proposal to develop policies related to the ongoing climate crisis. Please unmute and.
We have to move in second.
What's that?
We have to move in second.
It's been moved and seconded. It was tabled to this time specific. Now it's off this time, and I need to. I'm going to wait a minute to get the. I'm going to have to do a roll call. So I need to just quickly get the. Okay. Okay, that's the motion. Asking each of you for your vote, either aye or nay. So we'll go through your names one time and indicate whether you support sending the report on to the Policy and Amendment Committee to develop policies related to the ongoing climate crisis. Thomas?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Ann Beekman?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
Kelly?
Abstain.
Sean?
No.
Emily?
Yes.
Jackie?
Yes.
And Tim?
Yes.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 yes, 1 yay, 1 nay, and 1 abstention. 7, 1, and 1. So Wendy, if you didn't get that, I can send it to you, but the motion passed and these recommendations will go to onto the agenda of the Policy and Amendment Committee.
I got it, David. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Wendy.
Sure.
So moving on to new business, which we're going to move.
From my side of the notes, can you let me know who moved and who seconded last time?
It should be in the minutes from the last.
All right, I'll go find them.
Thanks.
Thomas, I can do it too.
Great.
Okay, if you already have it.
It
then
was
that's-
Emily and me. Emily made the motion. I seconded it.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Michelle. So new business, these are two things. One that Andy and I, well, actually, we talked about both of them, but we want to have a discussion, and I think tonight's not the time to do it, but it has, a number of you have asked about having students in our meetings and the difficulty in the past of them having anything to do except sit there and, kind of be terribly bored. So what I'd like to do is on an upcoming agenda, maybe next week, because it's not as heavy as some other, well, probably not because it's right before Thanksgiving. But on an upcoming agenda, ask people to think about how we could actually meaningfully engage students in our conversations. A lot of them don't really relate very directly to students. And in the past, it hasn't been, it's been difficult. So it may make more sense to have them in committees. It may make more, how do we choose a representative group of students? So anyway, that's part of the question. And then the other part, and Andy had a really excellent insight on this one as well, is students on hiring committees. And not just to look over applications and participate in interviews like they did with the superintendent search, but also, I mean, Andy had a couple of, I think he said fifth and sixth graders that when he applied for the job in Rutland, he had lunch with them and learned a great deal from them about the district just from that experience. So there's just how many different ways can we involve students in the hiring process and in participating in choosing our staff. So those are a couple of things that they will just ask you to think about them, and we'll put them on the agenda and actually have a conversation about them in the not too distant future. And then the last thing on new business is the, Sean, you have your hand up, is it? Oh, good, you took it down. Okay, great. The last thing is the WSESD Board of Ethics Pledge, and I will put that up. There it is. Okay, this is a document that school boards typically, can everyone see it? Somebody tell me if anyone can see it.
Yes.
Okay, it's fairly long, and I don't particularly want to read it. You all have it in with the documents for this meeting. Has everybody had a chance to read it? Do we want to vote? We actually have to sign individually. None of us can be forced to sign it. It has no. There's no sanctions associated with it. It's something I think that the School Board Association put together. It's just sort of generally general statements of the perspective, an ethical perspective. And board members typically sign this. I'm not sure we don't take an action on it because it's an individual commitment which you choose to sign or don't sign, I believe, unless you have other information about it. So I guess what I'd like to do is, rather than go into this in depth, have people read through and decide, and just say let me know whether you want to sign it, and then we'll figure out a way for people to get together to come in to the central office and sign it. And again, it's something that I can't think of any boards that have, unless it's changed, and I didn't read it really carefully before the meeting, but unless it's changed, I don't think it's very controversial. And most boards, I don't know of any boards that haven't adopted it, unless somebody had a specific principal objection to ethics pledges. Jackie, question or comment?
Comment, I read it beforehand and I'd be comfortable going down to central office to sign. That would work for me.
And if you come down to central office, you get the benefit of popping in and saying hi to me.
No, they don't let you in to say hi, Andy. You can stand on the porch and sign it in the rain.
I'm gonna scare you to death like you did to me at the co-op, and we've been waiting for this opportunity.
Okay, so is that okay with everybody to just read through it and Barb can put it in the envelope starting on, Andy can send out notice for the day that it's there and it'll be there for a week or something like that, and people can go in and sign it, or it may be possible to sign it electronically too. But so is that acceptable?
Yep.
Great. If it's not, tell me. Okay, great. So we got through it. Public comment on non-agenda items. We still have public here. Are there any items in the, oops, let me get rid of this. Any items on the agenda that are not on the agenda that people would like to comment upon? Andy, do we need an executive session?
Yes, we do.
Okay. For
personnel.
Personnel, okay. I don't have my little thing in front of me, but I move that we enter executive session to discuss under 313 of Vermont statutes to discuss a personnel issue where premature public knowledge would put the district and the person at disadvantage.
Seconded.
I'm sorry? Sean, what?
Second, I said.
Oh, thank you. Moved and seconded to go into executive session. All in favor, please unmute and indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, I'm going to pause there. I'm going to resume the video, and we will rise from executive session at 9:58, taking no action. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, there being no further business before this board, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
I love when we get to chuckle when it comes time to adjourn. I love that.
Which is really funny because Sean is the only one in on the inside joke, really.
Yeah, who's lived it?
Yeah.
Well, actually, I've seen it once or twice, but not so regularly. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned at 9:59. Thank you so much for all of this. It's another long meeting, but people are just 100% here, and it's really remarkable to me that you persevere. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good night.
Good night, everybody.